Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is 5 o'clock, so welcome to our council meeting for this beautiful November 25th day. As you see, this weekend we had our first large snowfall, and boy, well, that was a lot of snow. I think I was up there 3 times shoveling in the same day, and it looks like our staff have been out as well. So kudos to Public Works. They're out there fairly soon after to take care of the priority roads. And if everybody wants to know what they are on our website under snow clearing, snow maintenance, and it lists the roads and the timing that we'll get most of them done. And then from that, there's also a blurb on residential clearing. So it has to be a certain parameters before residential clearing gets initialized. So if you're ever interested, look that up on the website, and then you can just ask us questions and then just kind of share that with the residents. Members of Council, there is an agenda before you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that Town Council adopt the November 25, 2024 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any additions, administration?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing to add at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Call the question. All in favor? Yeah, and that's carried. Okay, moving on with the agenda. Number 3 is a public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to address council on anything that's not on the current agenda, so they can bring up items of concern, want to share some thoughts or observations they saw in their community, and maybe just then plant the seed for kind of future projects for the town of Stony Plain. Administration, has anybody registered to speak?
Through your worship, no one has registered this evening.
Okay, has anybody in the gallery like to speak to council? Okay, none, so we'll move on to number 4, which is presentations and delegations. We have nothing scheduled tonight, so moving on to number 5, which is statutory public hearings, and we have nothing scheduled either. Moving on to number 6, which is adoption of council minutes, so from the corporate plan of November 4th and 5th, and the RCM of November 12th of 2024. Councillor Hansard?
Mr. Mayor, I move that Town Council approve the November 4-5 2024 corporate plan meeting minutes from November 12, and the November 12, 2024 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Members of council, you have the opportunity to review them. Any errors, omissions, or questions on those minutes? Okay, I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that is carried. Okay, moving on to number 7, which is council boards and committees. We have one, which is 7.1, which is for the, I believe it's for the Cultural Roundtable. Councilor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council received the council board and committee minutes for information.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments on those minutes? Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just reviewing the minutes in the attendance, we've got councillor with an excused absence, but I don't see an alternate there. I'm just wondering if that was a miss in the minutes or what went on there.
Okay, thank you. And I believe the Cultural Roundtable, we do have a councillor as an alternate. Councillor Hansard?
Mr. Mayor, that may be because my husband and I went on a rather impromptu trip. I don't recall noting my alternate. I believe at that time it was Councillor Loynes. I wasn't actually sure what day we were leaving was the problem.
Okay, so that just the representative did not contact the alternate?
You want to say that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, I think the question was there an alternate? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments for clarity and understanding? See none? Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. Moving on to number 8 of our agenda is bylaws, looking at fees and charges for the next year. 8.1 is the 2025 fees and charges bylaw. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. We are pleased to present the annual update to the User Fees and Charges Bylaw. User fees and charges are an essential part of revenue for the town to be able to provide services. They provide excess of 35% of total revenue for the town. The user fee philosophy for the town supports wherever possible a user pay for service model is adopted to cover costs for service delivery. The bylaw is reviewed annually in alignment with the corporate planning process. The user fee principal philosophy is guided by Revenue and Taxation Policy CFS 051. The fees and charges are reviewed annually by each department and adjustments are made as necessary. This process includes comparison to other municipalities, as well as analysis of cost recovery where possible. This process includes, repeating myself there. Each general manager now will go through the highlights and of the changes in their area of the bylaw.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. For corporate services, you'll see there are some finance and FOIP service changes related to comparisons to municipalities and to inflation, as well as some changes that align with FOIP regulations for language clarity. With respect to tax certificates and other tax-related fees, it's been administrative cleanup.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Community Protective Services. So we've broken them into areas just to make it easy for council to understand the respective areas where changes were made. Within the arena fees and charges, we removed this public skating sponsorship, as that generally is a procured process versus a fee. And an example of that would be if someone wanted to give us $10,000 for their sponsorship and we settled on $1,500, then we would just have to accept the $1,500. So that gives us a bit more flexibility with respect to the sponsorship of that particular event. Heritage Park. So this is where you will see a lot of the majority of the red on the bylaw. We removed references to services that had no fee, as the fee it's not a fee in essence when there's a zero value attached to it. We also removed services that are better referenced in rental agreements. So that is primarily forks, knives, plates, napkins, extra tables, the drapery, those types of things. So sometimes in a rental agreement, we have the ability to use those types of things to ensure that we're catering directly to the person that would like to rent the facility. And sometimes those come into play with respect to making it an event that they are able to or want to host at our facility. Often some of those are also market driven. So if we have a napkin rental as an example for $2 in a bylaw, but it costs us $5, and we're actually subsidizing that particular piece of equipment for that rental potentially. And there was some administrative cleanup with respect to that part of the bylaw. Outdoor pool, just to capture something on page 63, the senior admission, daily admission, we noticed a clerical error that should read $6 instead of $5 as it reads in your document today. So we would be asking that with first reading, if council was inclined to move that back to $6 per daily admission, that there would be, as amended, would be the motion for the first reading. The fee increases were done in alignment with comparators that have outdoor pools, and we did some administrative cleanup also with the outdoor pool fees and charges. Sport fields, again, administrative cleanup. Primarily it was around the premier field, the soccer and football, regardless of if they're playing soccer and football, the fee's the same. So we just made it premier field, regardless of defining what the sport was at that particular field. Again, concession, we removed this because it's procured, it's not a fee. So if someone is prepared to pay a bit higher, the fee stated in the bylaw would restrict us from taking that higher value. And the golf course, again, the fees were market-driven in terms of the golf course would do their fee comparison across the metro region and ensure that we were comparable to those that we would be competing with for those particular services.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. For planning infrastructure, the majority of the proposed changes concern for permits and fees related to development. The review considered time staff takes to process, review, intake, approve, prepare material, and communicate with applicants. For each application type on an average, given substantial range of certain applications in each type. A jurisdictional scan was conducted using similar municipalities, notably in the Tri-region, as they represent adjacent municipalities and similar sized municipalities as well with the Greater Edmonton region. When considering these rates, the town does try and stay somewhere in the middle with these comparators, while also respecting the costs that are passed through to the town by external factors. Trade permits and fees have historically been recommended and set based on a service agreement between the town and the Safety Codes Contractors Agency. Some key points just to highlight the council for consideration this evening include all of these fees have seen some increases just due to safety code rates increases from the inspections themselves, and staff have taken the time to ensure that when considering how these fees increases have occurred and presented tonight, that they have been rounded to the nearest multiple of 5. So that is to make the fees themselves a little bit more consistent within the form as presented tonight. Lastly, there are some changes through the solid waste and utilities areas. These are increases that are either due to contracted values or from external agencies that are passed through costs. Some of these were the same information that was presented to council during the corporate plan. And that concludes my short presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, I will turn it back over to you, Your Worship, for any questions from council on the bylaw presented.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the update of the user fees and charges. I think, as mentioned earlier, these user fees and charges, what has been recommended goes to support our corporate plan that we'll be looking at and approving here at the 9.5. Members of council, any questions for clear understanding? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with an easy one. I think it was page 63 was referenced by administration. Just looking at the outdoor pool admissions costs. Previously, there was a line for children under 7, waiting tank as free. But in the draft that we have presented to us today, it starts at children 6 to 12, and there's no mention that I've seen in reference to children that are under 6 years old. And so just wondering where they're captured in the fees for the outdoor pool.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship, to Deputy Mayor Anderson. Again, when staff were looking at the fees, they were aligning it with, primarily Devon is the pool that we align our fees and charges with. So I would make the assumption that they have a fee related to 6-year-olds. We had a 7-year-old, so we're just aligning with that across the region. So perhaps we were a little bit different in the last year or so. We've brought it in alignment with the regional comparators.
Perfect, thank you for that. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, just looking for the cost for children under 6. So are they free with a paying adult, or there's just no mention here for the younger children?
Mr. Mayor, through you to the Deputy Mayor, sorry for that. Yes, they would be free, as there's not a fee for anyone under 6. I would also suggest that children under 6 would likely be with an adult, just because of their ability to navigate through the water. So they would be free based on that user fee charge that if adopted this evening, because there is no fee attached to it, as we made the recommendation that if there's no fee attached to it, then we wouldn't put it in the fees and charges bylaw. So they would be free, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Anything else, Councillor?
No, I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question related to page 32, Schedule A. Just a question regarding the animal license fees. When we look through the license fees, the annual license fee for an animal is very, very low. We're looking basically at $40 for a non-fixed animal or $20 for a fixed animal. When I think of what all is included in that, we're looking at, there's a tag that they receive, there's the staff time to process the transaction, the software that's used to record it, etc. And I'm just wondering, are we actually recovering enough revenue to cover those costs and those expenses? And I've several conferences I've gone to, spoken to a lot of other colleagues, and they've talked about how they've gone to a lifetime license for an animal. And so when somebody acquires a pet, they get a dog, they get a cat, they go to the municipality, they get a license for that animal, and that lasts the lifetime of that animal. Is that something that we've looked at?
Go ahead, administration.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Laurie. So Generally speaking, with the animal control tags, they are bought in bulk, so I would suggest that the unit rate that we're paying per likely is covered with the cumulative fees that we raise. The other reason why we do have a fee is it allows us to be able to identify animals on an annual basis, because when we do pick an animal up, the ability for us to take that animal back to the home or contact the owner of that particular pet on an annual basis, getting that information is more beneficial to our officers than having a lifetime pet license. From year to year, we're not sure if they've added a pet, not added a pet. There's an onus for them to come in and get the license. That can hold true with the current system. However, officers did choose and feel that this was more beneficial on an annual basis and being able to contact the owners when we had animals that were at large.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And following on that, I guess I'm not sure how that really would apply, because if somebody's come in and added their animal to that registry once and it stays on that registry rather than going year over year, because correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we send out notices annually again to homeowners. And so when somebody gets their pet, they may very well come in and the first thing you do when you get an animal, you're getting that license and so on and so forth. But if they're not receiving any reminder on an annual basis to come in and pay for that license, are we actually capturing it? Are we ensuring that every animal in the municipality is getting a license? And just curious if we have any data on that, or how we would be tracking that. If do we have a year-over-year comparison to show us if our license numbers have stayed the same, or if since we've eliminated the mail-in notice or the mail-out notice, if our numbers have come down?
Mr. Mayor, through to Councilor Laurie, I don't have that data directly in front of me this evening, but certainly I would ascertain that that data could be attained fairly quickly with respect to whether we put licenses out, if there's been a change reflective to the number of people that do come into the office on an annual basis. I guess at the end of the day, we do have a responsible pet ownership bylaw, and it's called responsible pet ownership simply because owners are responsible for the actions of their animals, which includes a license at this point. If our officers do get to a home where the license may or may not be in effect, they certainly would educate that particular owner, and they would give them a time frame of which they could come and pay that license, and if not, then a violation would be given to that particular owner.
Excellent, thank you. And then can you refresh my memory when the responsible pet ownership bylaw would be due for review by council?
Your Worship, through to Councilor Laurie, if you give me a moment, I can look that up.
Yeah, even just a follow-up an email after the council meeting would be fine on that. I don't think we've seen it in quite some time, so just curious as to whether we can expect it within the next year.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Hansard, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through to our general manager, I'm wondering if are people able to go online and register their animals, and do they get a discount for doing so? I'm just thinking about many people that are working during the day, during our normal business hours. How do they go about getting their animals registered? I'm just wondering if we have an easier process for them to be able to be responsible and do that.
Your Worship, through to Councilor Hansard, I would look across the hall here to see if we had the online option, but at this moment, my understanding is it's in person.
Okay, follow up, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering if it would be possible for us to consider that, maybe. I have no idea what the complications might be, but it seems to me some people might just do that more voluntarily without having to make a trip here to the office.
Yep, and thank you for that comment. And I think that's a possibility that staff can review it as we change our enterprise software over the next year or two, when we actually have the ability to do that. And maybe those will be like automatic notices going out. Is that right, administration? Is that okay?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, e-permitting is one of the components that we're looking at through the enterprise system. So that is something we would be looking to include, is that online licensing.
Thank you. Any more questions for clear understanding? Councillor Anderson? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at page 49 of our package this evening, specific to our transit service fees, I have two questions on these ones here. With the understanding that our sort of day-to-day on-demand transit is operated by Spruce Grove, I'm just looking for some clarification. I believe in a comparison, obviously these are the same as Spruce Grove's, but what happens if there's an adjustment sort of on the Spruce Grove side through their council process? How does that reflect on what we approve here through our budget, our fees and charges bylaw?
Mr. Mayor, through to the Deputy Mayor, we do our professional best to ensure that these fees are tracked the same. Do appreciate that both councils may have a different timing with respect to and may make some changes when it comes before each individual council. I would say if our document is adopted with these current fees and Spruce Grove makes a fee adjustment, then we would likely have to bring the bylaw back to make those amendments to that particular section of the bylaw.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any reason or that this couldn't just state as per the transit fees and bylaws as established by Spruce Grove as the operator of that system, so we're not duplicating this, like us doing it in our chambers and Spruce Grove doing it, approving it in theirs? Is there an opportunity there to sort of streamline that process?
Your worship, I can maybe provide maybe a more generalized comment, and then if the general manager wishes to supplement, certainly able to do so. So, to be clear, not all of our fees and charges are what I would call legislatively required to be in a fee and charges bylaw. It's a choice that we make, and as well as many others municipalities make. We do have options to not do that. We will consider those through the course of this year as we move forward as to what other methods there are for certain types of fees and certain types of charges and so on and so forth. So I would just say, broad-based, the answer is the document in front of you is not absolutely a statutory requirement, but it is a practice that is used, and we do intend to review that aspect of it. If the general manager has anything to add specific to transit.
Your worship, to the Deputy Mayor, we would have to look at our contracts that we have to provide that particular service, and I would suggest we would have to, if it's not currently captured in that particular documentation, if we were to lean that way, we would have to ensure that there was some provision that stated that that's how the town of Stony Plain would handle the fees.
Sure, and certainly not, a push from my perspective to go that route. It's just if they're the ones establishing this as the operator of that system, just wondered if there was maybe a more straightforward way of presenting that to us here this evening. I do have a second question, if I may,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
I just want to jump into that too, yes, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And also, we're okay to have different fees as well. I think a lot of our fees and charges are a little slightly different. Even though that they're the operator, we can still charge the fees that we have approved, and then anything different that may come back through an obligation or a contract with the operator, we can, as a council, choose to eat that, which has happened before. But I think if these fees are there, that's based on the conversation that we've had with our staff with theirs in terms of the contract agreement, so they kind of divided it up. But I do have another question before we go off that, is in terms of the fees and charges under Schedule B on page 55. I have a very similar question because we operate that for the city of Spruce Grove as well for the accessible transportation. I know in the past, I think a year or two, we've added additional ATS vehicles and drivers to support the increased demand. Are these fees enough to cover that? Because I think our demand is outstripping what we can provide at a reasonable rate.
Your worship, based on that particular question, again, market drives a lot of what we do related to fees. Certainly, if council was looking at a more directive what is the subsidy rate for ATS, we would have to have a larger conversation about how to set that versus going and checking comparator services and making sure our fees aligned with those comparator services.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, you had another question? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly a lot to unpack there, and maybe just a quick comment. I think maybe speaks to the importance of a greater conversation with our neighbors about how we sort of manage the transit moving forward. And, you know, I certainly appreciate, Mr. Mayor, what you've presented in terms of being able to have a different schedule, but would certainly not want to see, you know, two different fares dependent on where that fare originates, right? Spruce Grove to Stony Plain is one, but Stony Plain back is another, right? We'd certainly want, in my opinion anyway, some synergy there in what the fares cost to move between the two municipalities. My second question relates to, same page, sorry, but looking at the fees for sorry, now I just lost my page, I apologize. The commuter passes for low-income newcomers. I believe the conversation last year, in part, was some government funding that came through to subsidize the low-income transit passes. Spruce Grove was one of the 6 municipalities at the time that received some of that grant money, and as the operator extended us to Stony Plain as well. Does the Government of Alberta still provide grant money? Are we still benefiting from that, or are these newcomer passes now fully subsidized by the municipalities?
Your Worship, through to Deputy Mayor. My understanding is when the funding was rolled out last year, it was under-prescribed, so the funding carried forward. I would have to do some follow-up to see if new funding was provided within the new budget to extend that. One of the options was, if the funding was not received or not able to carry the program forward, Spruce Grove was prepared to put it in their own budget and continue to run the program, and we would get the heads up if that was the case, and we have not received that. So I believe that funding still carries forward, and there's still some money within that account that will continue with that particular program, and we'll get notice if the municipalities choose to or want to continue that in their own jurisdictions.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any more questions of a clear understanding on the fees and charges? Okay, I'm going to go back to the ATS on page 55. That's the Schedule B. So I know I'm sure members of council have received a few concerns from residents regarding the ability to book the ATS because it's busy as well utilized the many that we provide, service that we do. So my question is, in terms of the fees, if somebody was to book a ATS ride from Stony Plain or Spruce Grove to, let's say, St. Albert for $40 for a appointment, then does that ATS bus come back to pick up another driver? And then the individual would have to come back? Because I think return is 50, so if somebody has an appointment there for 3 hours, am I reading that right, that the ATS would come back and then go back and pick them up in 3 hours for an additional $10?
Your Worship, the answer is yes. If it's $40 one way, $50 return. Would the same driver drive back to Stony Plain, then drive back to St. Albert? Likely not. There's a number of buses going in and around the region for different appointments. So there could be someone that's in the city of Edmonton that on their way back, they would move through St. Albert, pick that person up, and come back into Spruce Grove, Stony Plain. So the staff do a fantastic job in making sure that the efficiency of the system, the schedule is built around the efficiency of the system. So if someone happened to be in St. Albert, they would certainly look for something that's closer versus a bus going back and forth and not being full or not having another transfer back into Edmonton as an example before going to St. Albert to pick that particular person up.
Okay, you know, as my one grandma and my parents are getting older, so I've taken them to a few appointments. Sometimes that appointment goes overtime. So how do we ensure that if somebody uses the ATS to get to an appointment, that they're able to get a ride back if you're waiting for another ATS to come around to pick them up? Because they may be early or they may be late in terms of finishing their appointment.
Your worship, again, it's a challenging service for sure. And we've all been to medical appointments where they are very quick and sometimes they're a bit more lengthy. The drivers have contact with our different clients. They also have contact with staff that may be at the facilities of which people are dropped off at. And so there's good communication between our service and the client so that we're well aware of what's happening. So we can adjust the schedule accordingly.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions for clarity and understanding? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to apologize. I still have a few. So I feel like I'll throw a few in here if I can. So thank you for that. I am jumping back to sort of our busing fees. I apologize. This one was further down my list, but if an attendant is to ride our transit system with someone with a disability, for example, would they be paying the standard fare as the attendant for that particular individual?
Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Anderson, can you just clarify where you're looking specifically, please?
Yeah, my apologies. So I'm on page 49, I think is the page in the new copy, 81 in the red line. Just looking, maybe I'll give you the context. So looking at Spruce Grove's fees related to transit, they do have a line that specifies specifically that an attendant for someone with a disability is able to ride at no cost as the attendant for that individual. But when we compare that to our transit service fees, I don't see anything here that's specific to that context. And I'm just wondering if we would follow Spruce Grove's example as the operator to allow the attendant to ride for free with the individual, or whether they would be expected to pay a fare to take that transit ride.
Your Worship, through to Deputy Mayor, thank you for the clarity. Yes, we would not, no, we would not charge them. There would not be a fee. If we recall, we did not have this in our fee schedule last year. Spruce Grove did not either, and they made a motion to put a zero fee for attendance in the fees and charges for transit. We could have administratively made that decision, but Spruce Grove has made the option to put it in specifically. Because the buses are run and because the drivers are managed by the city of Spruce Grove, that knowledge is there with those particular drivers. So if someone was, as an example, to be picked up in Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, with an attendant, there's an entire process that they have to go through, and they have to provide identification to say that they are an attendant. They are required to be with this particular person, and that waives the fee for them to ride the transit service.
Okay, thank you for that, and appreciate the context, and I'm certainly happy to hear that there wouldn't be a fee charged to the attendant. I am going to question maybe whether it should be included here, and certainly I appreciate that we can defer to Spruce Grove, but we do that for our fares that are set as well. And just wonder if there's clarity for our own public as well that may go looking for some of this information, if it would be helpful to have it readily available and just have a line that, copies or, mimics or whatever you want to say what Spruce Grove has put in regarding the attendance for passengers with a disability. And so, I don't know, I maybe look down looking to see, I'm not really seeing any head nods from my colleagues, but, certainly I think there is some validity in having it in here. So I guess I'll just leave that one for now. Sorry, I'm going to jump on to another one here, 73, if you don't mind. This is other building permit considerations. We had a number of things here, swimming pools, hot tubs, decks, and so on, that have been blue lined, crossed out and removed. Just wondering sort of where that now gets captured in our fees and charges.
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor. Thank you for the question. As I mentioned in my presentation, there's always there's work to try and align and minimize I guess confusion across the different permits. Generally, with I believe you're referencing the I think you mentioned in your question miscellaneous other building permits section.
That's correct.
Yeah. So those have generally been, I believe, just reconciled under some of the other sections and the increases across there. The teams are always looking for ways to make it easier for people to come in and get this work done through the existing permitting sections. So those have just been generally moved around into other sections.
Okay, so just theoretically, I want to build a swimming pool. It used to be $100. What would now be my cost, or where would I find the cost for that specifically?
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor, if you can just give me 1 second, I'm just scanning through my notes here.
Hi, Your Worship. I'm just looking at it so I can pull it up. It's, I believe, on page 72. It's on the track change version. Minimum building permit fee includes miscellaneous permits, and then there's a list of examples there. So I believe that's where it would go.
Perfect, thank you. And I appreciate that. I do see that, the list there as well. Now, so if I come in, apply for that permit for a swimming pool, for example, other than, the permit, here at Town Hall, does a safety officer or anyone, come down to look at the property? Are there any human requirements, I guess, over and above that application permit that would be factored into the cost there?
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor, those would be captured. The short answer is yes. If there's a deck permit offered, then there's generally a follow-up with the applicant on if they've completed their work in alignment with the application and the review that's been provided by the town.
Okay, thank you for that. I can keep going, Mr. Mayor, or do you want to go down the line there?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This one's just simple, page 83. I think this is just my eyes. I may not have had my glasses on when I looked at this, but looking under the solid waste billing, there's a couple of spots where there's a 1 and a 4 next to each other. Just the font of the 4 looks like it's crossed off. Looking at, as an example, each additional organics and or waste cart for institutional facilities. My eyes with the red line looks like that says $1, but I'm going to assume it's $14. And it's just the way that the font reads, that it looks like the 4 and the 8 are both crossed off there.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, the 4 goes, it ends, but it looks like it carries through because there's a cross outline to the 8.
Yeah, okay.
Same with the 4 and the 0.
Yeah, one a little bit further. Yeah, same question was on that one, so I appreciate the clarity there. With the, jumping back up, all residential dwellings except apartments here under solid waste billing, we see an increase here about 30 cents in this particular fees and charges bylaw. Just wondering what all is captured in that $30.69. Is this strictly the curbside pickup, if you will, of the organics cart and the waste carts? Does this include our recycling center over by the Public Works building, that sort of thing? What all gets captured in this number?
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor. So the solid waste building and the all residential except apartments. So anything that the town organizes a contractor to go pick up is covered under these rates here. So if there were external contractors, maybe for different facets, they would not be captured here. But generally, this is where the bulk of the residential pickup that you see with the bigger trucks going around would be captured.
Okay, so I think the question is then that's for the blue bags, the organics, and
Rotary Recycling Center, yes. All of that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship, to you and all of council. So that would be a holistic cost, including the recycles, any staff time for billing, etc. We have a solid waste model that is net zero as well, works towards net zero, so that's how those fees are established.
Okay, so with the addition this last year of the tire recycling at the Rotary Recycling Center, is there an additional cost to the municipality for adding that additional service? Is that already captured here? Is there maybe a provincial program or something that makes use of those tires at no cost to the municipality?
Through your worship, the Deputy Mayor, with respect to the tire recycling, that was done via an agreement with an external client. There was no cost to the town to recycle rates there. Oh, pardon me. I thought you were trying. Oh, pardon me. Generally with the there are some items captured in the rate that would fall into, like, we have to use the contracted services to haul away the bins from the recycle center. We use a contracted service; those are captured in the rates. But there are some services that we can leverage provincial programs for that we just provide a pickup point, and a contractor or other agency or service would come and pick them up.
Thank you for that. And through you, Mr. Mayor, with the introduction of the extended producer responsibility program, certainly something I know that we'll be looking at in the upcoming year. When might the cost savings seen through that program be realized by the residents of Stony Plain?
Through your worship, the Deputy Mayor, that's council received an update on EPR not too long ago. It's something we're currently working through an agreement with the contractor Circular Materials right now, as per council's direction. I don't yet have an update on that, but it is progressing forward, and it is something that we expect to update council via any effects of fees on once we have those concluded.
Okay. Thank you. And that, when those fees get adjusted, then it just comes to council for ratification?
Your worship, through all council, yes.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councillor?
Yeah, one final one, I think. We've had a number of conversations in this room over the last 3 years regarding opportunity for introducing some form of program that would allow residents to purchase a second pickup or something like that, some additional bags, maybe it's Christmas or a birthday or otherwise. And we've sort of had a number of different conversations about what that would look like. I know administration has mentioned that they were looking into sort of different options and what we might be able to make available to residents for those times where they may prefer, curbside pickup of the extra waste as opposed to having to take it to a neighboring municipality to dispose of. And just looking for an update on those conversations and wondering if that potentially would be a part of our negotiations for our waste collection contract that's coming up in the new year, or when we might see an update accordingly.
Through your worship, to Deputy Mayor. Right now, as you alluded to, our current contract is coming up for renewal in the next within 2025. So we are preparing to move a tender out for public, review in the coming months to align with that. We're always looking to see what options sometimes the contractors can offer through this process as we do contract out all of our services. Those service enhancements and alignments are things that we hear from the community as well. And we do see where we can make some logical changes or suggestions to the contract process that would allow us to meet those needs. As of right, to answer your question directly, those are, we're always looking at the changes around us as well. So the changes with EPR, with the changes with the contracting coming, those we will be exploring what other options we can look at. At this time, right now, I don't have an update as to what services may or may not be changing.
Okay, thank you. So I think the conversations we've had around the strategic table is that when the tender goes out and we're looking for a new service provider, I think the conversation was we don't want everybody to have too many bins because it just clutters up the things. But if we can add a program like I think some municipalities have, it's called a Take-A-Bag. So for that example, that, residents can buy up to 5 tags at X number of dollar cost. So if they do have larger events, like for Christmas or birthday, they can come in the town office and pick it up and put a bag out there with the tag, which will be picked up, so they don't have to worry about figuring out where they're going to use it. So if we're going to contract out this year in 2025, if that's not an option, then that's not an option coming back. But I think council would like to see an option for something similar to that.
Through your worship to all the council, that's certainly a comment I can take away. We haven't yet put the contract out yet, so that's something that we can consider, what options might be available for the town to consider on that.
Right. Thank you. I think once we know those numbers, then if that's the service that we provide, we just figure out what the net zero is. If it's $10 a bag, then it's $10 a tag. If it's $20, then it's $20. Like, I don't think we're here to make money on that. We're here to make sure that we provide those extra services for those residents that may need it here and there through a larger event, or if they have a big family gathering. So I think that's, again, increasing and enhancing the services that we currently do have.
Yeah, thank you for your comments there, Mr. Mayor. I think that captures the intent of what I was asking. Certainly, sort of we hear or I've heard on an ongoing basis that, an event's been had or a holiday's gone by, and we have individuals in the community who maybe don't have the ability to dispose of that independently and are looking for sort of a public service that would be able to support that additional waste at key times throughout the year. And so I appreciate the clarity there. And with that, I'll end my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Loynes.
Apologize. Thank you, Your Worship. To you through administration, on page 83, I noticed that the return check and NSF charges were crossed out, but I didn't see it being replaced anywhere else. Are we no longer charging for bounce checks?
Administration.
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Loynes, that specific one was just removed from the section because it's captured in the finance section, so it's duplication.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions and comments? Okay, so just for my clear understanding, so in terms of the public skating sponsorship and the public swimming sponsorship, those will be a negotiated cost, so we'll no longer have a set fee attached to it. So it is, for example, right now, I believe that West Parkland Gas is sponsoring the swimming, and Fix It Right Plumbing is sponsoring the public skating. So through our conversations, we would negotiate the next contract without having council set a number. Is that correct?
Your Worship, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. That answers. Any other questions for clear understanding? Okay. Seeing none, Councillor Loynes.
Town Council give first reading to bylaw 2709/G/24, a bylaw to establish fees and charges for the provisions of certain licenses, goods, and services.
Okay. Thank you. And there was a comment earlier about being as amended, as that there was a issue and a change on, whatever page that is. You guys remembered. I have it written down, but I can't read it. But it's regarding the swimming for the seniors. It's supposed to match the other number. I forget what page that was. Okay, page 63. So if we're all good with that, that is as amended. Oh, you can just say as amended.
As amended.
Thank you. Questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay, see none, call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to second reading, Councillor Meyer.
Yes, thank you. The Town Council gives second reading to bylaw 2709/G/24.
Okay, questions, comments, and debate? Call the question. All those in favor? Okay, that is carried. Councillor Lowry, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the Town Council give unanimous consent to consider third reading to bylaw 2709/G/24.
Okay, so all those that maybe this is your first time joining us on the council meeting, if council does all three readings in one sitting, there has to be unanimous consent to talk about third reading. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that is carried. Moving on to third reading, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that Town Council give third reading to bylaw 2709/G/24.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Councillor Hansard, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, for the public, in their review, or those who are tuning in this evening, could you please just remind everybody what we are repealing, please?
Okay, currently, we're not repealing anything. This is third reading of the council bylaw for 2025 fees and charges.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, comments, and debate? No. So on behalf of council, thank you, administration, for making these adjustments and bringing it forward as the 2025 user fees and charges. And I appreciate the fact that there's a little bit more consideration about what the other fees are of our surrounding municipalities and making sure that they line up a little bit better. So thank you for that. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried. Okay, moving on to 8.2, which is the bylaw 2704G/24, and this is the general repeal bylaw. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, through your worship, to all of council. Administration is currently completing a review of the town bylaw register to ensure bylaws in effect remain relevant and valid. The bylaw before council represents a list of bylaws that have been identified as no longer required as they have been deemed obsolete or expired. Administration is requesting 3 readings of this bylaw this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of council, you had the opportunity to read them. Any questions or comments about the general bylaw? Okay, Councillor Hansard.
Mr. Mayor, I was ahead of myself when I asked that question last time.
You were.
Now, I know that not all the public will have access, or if they're watching us online, they will not go to the agenda. Are you going to call out each one of these that we are talking about repealing because these old bylaws are obsolete, or are you going to give a summary?
Okay. That's a good point, Councillor Hansard. So I'll just ask administration to read those out to us. They're on page 97 of 354. We'll start with bylaw 639.
Thank you, through your worship. The bylaws that we will be repealing this evening are bylaw number 639, which is a bylaw to authorize the town to enter into an agreement with Parkland County regarding fire services. Bylaw 880, to provide for the establishment of operation of a fire department. Bylaw 938, to prohibit red flashing lights on school buses. Bylaw 984, a bylaw to provide for a penalty when no penalty is specifically provided. Bylaw 1078/G/91, entering into a reciprocal building inspection agreement with Parkland County. Bylaw 2441/DNP/11, to establish permit fees for relocation and demolition of buildings. And bylaw 2516/DNP/14, leasing a portion of Woodlands Environmental Reserve to Evergreen Catholic School Division for portable classroom use for a period of less than 3 years.
Okay. Thank you. And all the bylaws are obsolete, except for the very last one, 2516DNP/14. That is expired. As mentioned by our staff, it was a 3-year lease agreement with Evergreen Catholic School Division to allow them to put some portables on some town land while they did the renovations and the expansion of St. John Paul II School. Okay. Members of council, any questions, comments on, and debate, or questions of clarity, actually? Let's keep it at that. Questions of clarity and understanding on the bylaw. Seeing none. Thank you. I definitely appreciate administration bringing this forward. As mentioned, over the years, administration has made it kind of their goal and their task is to clean up some of our bylaws, and having all these removed that are obsolete and no longer used and enforceable is excellent. I think some municipalities have given staff the direction that for every new bylaw that comes forward, 2 have to be repealed. So, so I think we had a couple of bylaws today, but I think we have about 7 here repealed, so that covers that. So thank you, Councillor Hansard, for first reading, please.
Your worship, I move that town council give first reading to bylaw 2705G24, a bylaw to repeal bylaws that are inoperative, obsolete, expired, spent, or otherwise ineffective.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay, call the question, all in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Councillor Pacheco, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council gives second reading to bylaw 2705/G/24.
Thank you. Questions, comments, and debate on second reading? Call the question, all in favor? Okay. Councillor Loyens, please.
Town Council give unanimous consent to consider third reading for bylaw 2705/G/24.
Thank you. And again, if council does all three readings in one sitting, there has to be unanimous consent from members of council. Call the question, all in favor? Councillor Meyer?
Yes, thank you. The Town Council give third reading to bylaw 2705/G/24.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments on debate on third reading? Okay. On behalf of council and our many residents that actually read those bylaws, thank you for removing them because they're obsolete and they're expired. But I'm pretty sure that 99.9% of our residents have not read those bylaws. So yes. And actually, I was looking through the bylaws and it's kind of interesting. Quite a few of those bylaws I was not here for. Two of them I was, which is kind of interesting, and one actually I signed off on when we did the agreement with Evergreen School Division. So again, brings a little bit of memory back, so thank you. Call the question, all those in favor? That is carried. All right, moving on to number 9 of our agenda, which is business items. We're looking at a couple of the reports that were scheduled for our October 28th meeting that has been deferred to today. So go ahead, administration, with 9.1.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Included in your council package tonight is the 2023 year-end financial trend report. This evening, we will highlight a few important financial indicators and the analytics behind them. The data presented shows historical data for the past 10 years as past trends predict future outcomes and paints a picture of where the town may be headed. This report is presented annually typically prior to corporate planning. However, was deferred this year to provide trends and analysis in compliance with accounting and financial reporting policy CFFS 028. Financial condition is the ability for an institution to maintain service levels, withstand economic disruptions, and meet demands. When assessing the town's financial conditions, there are some key questions we may ask, such as, can the local government pay for what it's doing now? Are there sufficient reserves or other financial vehicles available for financing emergencies? Is there enough financial flexibility for the local government to adjust to change? These are key questions to ask to ensure fiscal sustainability into the future when making decisions. As we have moved into the corporate planning cycle already, it's important to understand historical trends and comparators. Industrial price index or inflation is presented as a point of reference to the economy over the past 10 years. Given the diverse nature of municipal expenses and revenues, applying inflation universally will not provide an accurate representation, and this is better suited as a point of reference. Industrial price index for 2023 has decreased and was recorded at a negative 3% as per Statistics Canada. These amounts are calculated as of December 31st for each year over the prior year. The current chart on the screen shows population for the past 10 years, as well as forecasted population as per the town's population and employment forecast completed December 2022. The most recent federal census was completed in 2021. Prior to that, 2016 was the last published date. The town of Stony Plain population and employment forecast completed in December of 2022 projects population into the future years shown on the chart. Operation snapshot. Revenue and expenditure trends are an indicator of pace maintained regarding inflation, services added, and the corresponding revenue. Comparing these metrics as a per capita per capita layers on the population growth to ensure the town is keeping pace with growth pressures. Prior to 2020, the gap was closing between revenue and expenditures. In 2021 and 2, this seems to have leveled out and will continue to be monitored. If expenses were to grow at a faster rate than revenue or population, this trend would be unsustainable and indicate reserves being used to fund expenses. In regards to revenue per capita, Stony Plain consistently hovers above the median as related to the comparator group with a stable increase. When operating revenue per capita is adjusted for inflation, you can see a large decrease in the revenue. Revenue is a combination of grants, taxes, and sales and user charges. This chart shows the revenue per capita actually going down from 10 years ago, meaning it has not kept pace with inflationary factors. As benchmarked against our comparators listed on page 294, Stony Plain has continued to steadily remain above the median in operating expenditures per capita for the last 7 years, with the exception being 2020 that has dropped slightly below in 2023. The largest source of revenue for the town is property taxes. Stony Plain has remained at the lower end of the comparative municipalities in terms of property taxes per capita. However, new services have been added over the last 10 years and more on the horizon for future years. Stony Plain remains consistent as slightly below the median and on the low range. Assessment is a key component to property tax revenue and has shown consistent growth. In 2021, Council approved an updated revenue and taxation policy, which the transition for the current tax rate split between residential and non-residential to that of the average of the urban Edmonton Metropolitan Region Boards less Edmonton. This transition has taken place through to 2024 and will result in a more sustainable tax base and equitable division of tax share. In 2023, the average EMRB tax split less Edmonton increased to 1.43. Our tax rate split for 2024 was the final staged rate shift and was capped at 1.4 as defined within the policy as the maximum. This policy is due for review in 2025 and will be brought forth prior to the tax bylaw presented to Council in 2025. The percentage of non-residential assessment does continue to increase, which is an indicator of industrial growth. Reserve balances are another key financial condition indicator and have continued to remain below the median. Reserve balances for the town are lower than the median or near the bottom of the range. Reserve balances is a measure of the municipality saving for future needs, inclement events, or flexibility for unforeseen challenges. Through the Fiscal Sustainability Framework, an update of the unrestricted surplus policy in 2021, guidelines for reserve standards and optimal balances were developed. This policy guides the future of reserve balances that are used in conjunction with the corporate plan, which identify future reserve needs and ability to grow reserve levels to meet these needs and optimal balances. Council also committed the 1% tax transfer for infrastructure and equipment in 2021, which is a step in improving the financial health of the town's reserve. Long-term debt as a percentage of total assessment has stayed flat due to minimal debenture projects offset by continued debenture payments. As such, the town has the highest rating of AAA, which is excellent based on Global Credit Rating Agency. As part of the Fiscal Sustainability Framework and updated debt policy in 2020, Council implemented an internal debt limit of 80% of the allowable debt limit, which implies prudent and affordable debt balances. Future debt limits will continue to be monitored and presented through the corporate planning process and measured against the debt limit. Council's approval of the Fiscal Sustainability Framework in 2021 has solidified future guidance regarding a multitude of financial aspects for the town. These policies take time to work around towards optimal balances and decisions that will change the future fiscal health of the town. These trends will assist in understanding financial condition of the municipality into the future and support the corporate planning recommendations. I would now be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the report.
Thank you for the presentation, and that was very informative. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I always learn a ton when these come forward. I'm looking at page 170, just looking for, it's the long-term debt as a percentage of total assessment chart. Just looking for a piece of clarity here. Are we looking at the cost of servicing that debt per year based on the total assessment that we bring in a given year? Would that be an accurate understanding of this?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor Anderson. The chart on page 170 will take the total amount of long-term debt and then create a calculation as a percentage of the total assessment, so not assessment dollars, not tax dollars. So total assessment, which implies the ability to allocate debt to the population through assessment, and so that is what the percentage calculation is completed on.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have a follow-up just to make sure I fully understand, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, to clarify again, we're looking at the total amount of debt, not the cost of the debt servicing. Is that correct?
Thank you, through your worship, to the Deputy Mayor. That is correct, the total long-term debt.
Okay. And then is that compared to the total assessment, compared to the length of time of that long-term debt, not the total assessment in a given year or something like that? Sorry, I'm just looking for some clarity on how this actually tangibly plays out. So certainly I can see that, you know, it falls within the AAA rating and those sorts of things, but just for my own clarity, I'm a little bit confused. So total amount of long-term debt versus the total amount of assessment for the same duration of that long-term debt? Sorry, does that make sense? I think, saw you nod, so that might help.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor Anderson. So it is at a point in time, so it would be what our assessment was in that year and what our debt was in that year. So it's essentially the ability, how close we are to our assessment percentage to see what, you know, our ability to pay for that debt is.
All right, and I think that's where you lost me again. She talked about the ability to pay, but I think we said it's not debt servicing, but the ability to pay is actually the debt servicing piece, to my understanding. Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind just filling in the blank for me there.
Absolutely, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor Anderson. So the amount of assessment that is within a municipality would define how much burden would be spread amongst the paying residents, businesses within the town. And so that is how that measurement is. This is just one metric that is used. There's not a lot of metrics out there that do rate municipalities specifically based on a rating system. This is one that we have identified, and so we've continued to monitor ourselves against this.
Perfect, and I appreciate the time to walk me through that, so thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for that good questions. I think a lot of people kind of misunderstand that or read that. For easiest for me to understand is that if I look at like chart 168 of what the total assessment value is in the town, I think it's like, so that's how much our assessment for houses, assessment buildings, and how much we're borrowing up to that. And I think that's where it comes up to the percentage and then the rating. In terms of, I think your question about borrowing or the return of capital and cost of borrowing. Unfortunately, in Canada and definitely in Stony Plain, Alberta, we can't go out to the markets with our good debt rating. You know, as you see through the history, our staff have done a great job in maintaining our financial security and sustainability. If we needed to borrow money for something, for example, if we're going to go do a water project and we didn't have grants and we didn't want to raise taxes, we can issue bonds at certain different things, as some municipalities down in the States and that have the ability is that you can offer a lower percentage return on that because we have good debt ratings which people would buy. If we had bad debt ratings, if we were at triple B, so instead of offering, we need $10 million to do this at 3%, we'll have $10 million at 6%, so it will cost the municipality more. So our staff has done really well in making sure that we have that long-term debt stability so that we look good, so we don't go belly up, is the best idea to put it. It's like, we're not going to go belly up anytime soon. Okay. Councilor Hansard?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two things. One, I wanted to point us to page 169, since we're in that vicinity, and this is our total reserves. We're looking at about a 10-year span from 2014 to 2023, and in 2014, we had 22.5 million roughly in reserves. We went down significantly in 2015, and then we came up and then went down again. It looks like we're in a little bit of a trend of getting us back onto more stable ground with reserves, even though we've undertaken a number of projects, capital projects, et cetera. When we're looking at things like this, and we see that our reserves are building, I believe that part of that is we make a contribution every year at tax time back into our reserves. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
That is somewhat correct. So our administration, through our corporate plan, takes stuff out of our reserves to fund projects we've been saving for, and then also puts money back into other reserves that we may have projects coming in the future.
Okay.
There was a couple of years where council actually made a motion to add additional 1% to the reserve, which then has, again, helped escalate that over the last couple of years.
Brings ours up. Well, when the town is looking at times ambitious progress forward for the benefit of our taxpayers and residents, I think it's important to note that we don't forget that we have a responsibility to have some reserves so we can afford to pay for things. And of course, we're looking at the general term reserve, not sitting here looking at each individual reserve. So I just wanted to sort of say that out loud for the public, that the council is aware of that, and we are right now seeing an upturn in the amount of money that is going into our reserves. The other question that I had is we're at the end of 2024, and we're getting a report that takes us to the end of 2023. For sure, when Revenue Canada does the census, it takes them a long time to get back to us with the stats that come out of that, so we can begin to understand who we are as a town, where we're going, what our population is, and where it's headed. Does it take a full year for us to get all of this together so that here we are reporting on 2023 at the end of 2024? Or is there some other factor that seems to make it where we have such a long time to be able to look in the mirror and see where we've gone?
Yes. So again, staff through our auditor comes and reports to the town council during the audit, and all this information is presented during the audit as well. This is again just our staff showing what the financial trends has been for this last year. So all this information that we're receiving here has been presented by our auditor, Phil Dirks, back, I believe it was in April.
Okay. So you're just reminded us, Mr. Mayor, that generally we're getting a thorough audit every year, sometime around late spring.
Yes. So again, as you mentioned, so when year end is finished, which would be December 31st, our staff will be compiling all the files and closing different departments, and that's why there's always a call out, please submit your expenses now so that our staff can close those files, and then the auditor comes and reviews everything, and then they do their audit and their review, and then they come present to council, and at that time council has the opportunity to ask questions for clear understanding. If there's any questions that we may want more clarity on, and we'll also go in closed session to ask if there's any feelings or issues that the auditor has felt that maybe our staff was not not cooperative or not forthcoming information. So that is, all the stuff that is presented here today was presented back in April of 2024.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know our staff really looks forward to the audit period.
Yes, they do. They've done a great job, and for the last how many years in a row, we have won the financial award as well for presentations to our community. Thank you, Councillor Hanser. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay. Don't see anything, so thank you very much, Administration, for the report. Oh, yes, go ahead.
You asked for questions for clarity and understanding. Do we get to make a comment here, or does that come later?
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to simply say, in going through all of this, I usually do an overview when I'm reading my council package, and certain things strike me as to how we're shaping up or where we're headed with different items that are in our agenda. After I finish reading in more detail, I will sometimes go back and look at it again because it paints a different picture sometimes. I'm struck at how Stony Plain seems to be, for the most part, in the median range. We're not way above other municipalities and not way below, but just trending along in a very good place. Am I misreading this information, or am I seeing only what I want to see? Or does anyone, yourself or others, wish to make a comment about that, where we're standing? Because when we get a third quarter progress report in 2024, I think it's important for us to know if we view ourselves to be on the right track in many ways, or if we have to do some adjusting this next year.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Councillor Hanser, and definitely appreciate your observations. And you're absolutely right. So Town Stony Plain has been very tight in terms of our fiscal management, in terms of how much we want to borrow, how much we want to put in reserves. And I think that goes to show that our taxes are yet on the lower end of the medium. And that's why our reserves are on the lower end of the medium as well. So if council would like to change that and prepare more for the future planning, then we would have to increase taxes more to put aside dollars in the reserves. If not, it's a fine balance as members of us that sit around this table and have to make those hard choices of what is an appropriate tax increase or a tax decrease to make sure that we're able to continue to build a community without putting too much burden on our existing residents and then our future residents as well. Okay. Any more questions for clear understanding? Okay. Seeing none. Moving on to Councillor Lowry, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Town Council accept the 2023 year-end financial trend report for information.
Okay. Any questions, comments, and debate? Administration, thank you for the report. I definitely appreciate it. And as it shows to the financial health of our community, if this was a private business and we're able to borrow money with our AAA standard, we'll be actually getting really good borrowing costs, and we'll actually be able to build a lot more things, but we don't have that ability, so we have to just borrow what the government gives us. So I'm glad that we're still able to do what we need to do. So thank you. Call the question, all in favor? Okay. That is carried. Moving on to 9.2 of our agenda is the Strategic and Corporate Plan Q3 update. Go ahead, Administration.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. For your information this evening is the presentation of the third quarterly report, tracking the progress and actions related to the achievement of the strategic plan that Council approved at the end of the first quarter. I won't go into the details of the report. It's been provided in the agenda package for information, but certainly administration would be happy to answer any questions that Council may have this evening. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Administration. Members of Council, that is 9.2, and it starts on page 173, and is the third quarter report. Members of Council had the opportunity to read them and look at them. Any questions and comments about clarity, understanding, and where we are with in terms of our strategic planning for this year? Okay. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Looking down the
Deputy
line
Mayor?
to see if somebody else might want to go first this time. Two questions. On page 179, This is under the community development lens here. One of our goals that was added to our strategic planning in this last round was that about youth and involving future generations in as many ways as we can in our community and looking for opportunities to provide programs and services for our youth. I believe we had heard there was a youth center needs assessment that would be coming to council at some point, and just looking to administration for an update on that particular item.
Okay. Okay, go ahead. And that was the youth center review, I believe that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor Anderson and the rest of council. Yes, we have on our plans youth center needs assessment and engagement taking place in 2024. So we've been doing some of that work throughout the course of the year. We anticipate being able to do a presentation to council the first meeting after the new year in early 2025.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, that's perfect, actually, and that answers my follow-up question around hopefully seeing that or some version of it prior to our next round of strategic planning. I think there are some things that will be captured in there that will bear further discussion during that strategic planning session. With that, sort of the same context for my second question, and this is the same page, just backing up a little bit, looking at the Together We Shine initiative. I believe I asked the question a couple of weeks back related to the accessibility audit. I believe the general manager of Community and Social Development mentioned was underway, and that we could, if I'm not mistaken, hopefully see a report in Q1 2025, and sort of the same question there. Is that something that administration expects will come back to council prior to strategic planning in the new year?
Okay, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor Anderson and the rest of council. At this point in time, we do not expect that the report will be presented prior to the strategic planning meetings in January. However, we do anticipate that the report will be available late March, early April, which may have an impact on the final version of the strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions of clear understanding, members of council? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I just, for my own understanding, strategic plan obviously happens in January. When does that come back into council? Yeah, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor. We would typically bring the strategic plan back to council for review and approval prior to the end of the first quarter. So some of it just depends on the level of adjustments and revisions that need to be made, but that's always our goal, is to bring it back to council for approval prior to the end of first quarter.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, just a quick comment, Mr. Mayor, would certainly have liked to see that report prior to the strategic planning retreat, but would certainly like to see it prior to that strategic plan coming back for review, if at all possible. I think, again, that's one of those items that has been important for me, was an important part of conversations I had with residents during the election. And as we don't know what happens in an election year, certainly want to see some of those conversations sort of come full circle within this council term. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for clear understanding? Seeing none. Thank you for the report. Councillor Anderson, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that Town Council accept the Strategic and Corporate Plan Q3 2024 report for information.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay. Thank you, Administration, for putting this together. I know this is a quarterly report, but when we actually look through the stuff that has been initiated, started, and completed, it is a long and exhaustive list. So thank you for our staff, and also please pass along thank you to our partners that help us get those and achieve those goals. Okay. Call the question. All in favor? Okay. That's carried. Okay, moving on to 9.3. This is the last holdover from our October 28th meeting, and is the 2024 third quarter report. Go ahead, Administration.
Thank you, Worship. To you and Council this evening, provided for your information is the Q3 operational report providing highlights and summaries of key actions, initiatives, programs, and services that took place during the third quarter, as well as some comparative information as well. Some additional commentary and qualitative summaries to share on impacts and results that have been noted throughout the community and with key stakeholders as part of our work through the operational initiatives and administrative services to the town. Won't go through the details of the report, but it's been provided for council for consideration, and we will certainly be sharing this with the community as we move into the end of the last quarter of 2024, and administration is happy to answer any questions that council may have. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then again, members of council, questions for clarity and understanding, and it was in our agenda package. Okay, seeing none. Councillor Hansard.
Your Worship, I move that Town Council accept the 2024 third quarter report for information.
Okay. Thank you. Members of council, any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Yep, Councillor Hansard, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies for jumping here again. Again, I was hoping someone else might have a question. Just on page 193, this is our business milestones. Certainly tremendous appreciation to the businesses that have been in our community any length of time, but certainly when we approach significant milestones, looking at Summers Drilling here, 105 years is a significant investment in our community, Assinger Concrete, so on, 65 years. In the lead here under business milestones, it does mention that letter and certificate for mayor and council is distributed by mail. Just wondering sort of where that comes from. Do we have a business recognition policy or something? I think when we look at some of these businesses that are looking at significant milestones, I feel like maybe warrant more than something in the mail, whether that's a visit from a member of council or economic development team or something. But just wondering if we have something in policy that we'll have a chance to review, or is this just something that we've sort of done to recognize those milestones?
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Deputy Mayor Anderson and all of council. Our business milestone is a program, so it has a procedural transaction that administration follows to ensure that we recognize business milestones within the community. This gets updated and reflected and adjusted, and the recognitions occur on an annual basis. Certainly, we ensure that the businesses that have achieved a milestone receive the certificate and the letter as acknowledged in the summary. If there's an opportunity to present the certificate in an in-person or at an event, some of our businesses in the community take the opportunity to celebrate milestones, and so we try to align an opportunity to bring the certificate and the letter in person, but we certainly don't want to miss the milestone, and so we make every attempt just to ensure that it's delivered and distributed appropriately. There's also a large number of them, and so getting out and doing anything above and beyond to each and every business that's celebrating a milestone would be challenging. So we do ensure at minimum that we're providing those by mail.
Certainly, and I appreciate the number of businesses that do operate within our municipal borders. I think I'm maybe specific to the businesses with 50 plus years of operation as are laid out here. Certainly, I think 2023, 2, the year before, the year after, 4. I'm not familiar with the program that you mentioned and how that's all laid out for the business milestones, but I don't know if it's a state of the region thing where we could acknowledge those long-serving members or something, but I can't help but think recognition for 50 years doing businesses in our community that contributes to our assessment, that contributes to services offered to our community might be an important thing for us to be able to do. So just my thoughts and comments there.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, comments? Okay. Again, appreciate the administration bringing this forward. Actually, I learned something new reading this report, and information that I can never get out of my head because I'd read it. I did not realize that there was actually a Coffeyville I actually had to Google where that was. Did anybody catch that? That's actually on page 192 of the top page visits or some notable user locations. And I was reading, I'm like, you know, you talk about different things and we make up different names for communities when we're, you know, playing around as kids. And, you know, Coffeeville was like, I didn't think that was real. But it is, and it's stuck in his head now. It's like, it's information that I always have that I can't get rid of. All right, any other questions, comments on this? Okay, see now that, thank you for making the motion, Councillor Hansard. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. All right, before we go to 9.4, let's take a recess and we'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you. right, welcome back, members of council, admin staff, and those that are participating through the YouTube channel. Welcome back. We're moving on with our agenda, number 9.4, which is the council compensation review. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to all members of council. Prior to the meeting this evening, administration distributed an updated copy of the proposed policy to address a clerical error related to the council expense allocations. The expense allocations outlined within the lead sheet of the report and the distributed policy are correct, and these will be highlighted later in the slides. Municipal councils provide both leadership and service through governance. The remuneration they receive should attempt to strike a balance between the work that is required of a public official and the call to serve one's community. The council compensation policy acts as the governing directive to guide this balance. Earlier this year, council was advised that a policy review would be conducted through an administrative process incorporating a third-party salary comparative and market analysis. The administrative review was primarily intended as a remuneration-specific review with a holistic consideration of the council expense allocations. Comparator municipalities used in the market analysis were provided a list of questions to address the scope of the compensation review. The questions were related to base remuneration, municipal paid per diems, base compensation increases for 2023 and 2024, full-time versus part-time status, and estimations of average hours worked per week. Using data from the comparator Greater Edmonton Area municipalities used within the third-party report and an analysis of the 2023 salary disclosures outlined in their respective financial statements, administration completed a comparison of the median and average salary calculations. A summary of the comparison has been outlined in attachment 2 of the council report and forms the basis of the compensation recommendations. Expense budgets related to council activity was assessed, and administration is recommending that council members' annual expense budgets be combined into one overall budget that allows each member the discretion to use their annual allocation in the manner that best allows them to serve residents and the organization. The annual budget may be used for expenses such as attendance at conferences, training and development, educational materials, mileage, parking, meals, accommodations, and incidentals in the normal course of carrying out council business. The annual expense budget is proposed to be set at $25,000 for the mayor and $15,400 for each councillor. A policy review of comparator municipalities showed that many municipalities provide corporate technology assets to members of council. Council duties have evolved to require more reliance on technology related to meeting participation, constituent communications, and business activities. Essential security measures, optimal computer performance, and user support are key components to ensuring that technology meets the council members' needs. Administration is exploring the provision of a standard corporate technology package for council rather than a technology allowance for personal devices. Provision of corporate technology will result in enhanced computer performance, simplified management of one device between home and the workplace, improved information and security protection, alignment with town policy and practices, and internal technology support during business hours. To explore the feasibility of this option, administration will offer a pilot project commencing January 2025 for a 6-month period, allowing council members to use a corporate-provided laptop for all town-related needs, including accessing agendas and council meeting participation. This will allow members to assess the benefits of corporate-supplied technology and address any service issues that may be experienced. At the conclusion of the pilot project, administration will bring forward a report for council's consideration related to the technology requirements within the council compensation policy. Administration will be reaching out to members in the coming days to confirm their participation in the pilot project. The changes captured in the proposed new policy are summarized as follows: minor clerical, formatting, and administrative changes for clarity and alignment, a combined single expense budget for each council member, and adjusted council salaries to reflect the 2023 market average of the comparator Greater Edmonton Area municipalities and the 2024 and 2025 current council policy CPI increases, which will result in a salary increase for both the mayor and councillors. Administration is recommending approval of policy C-C0-065, council compensation and expense policy, which will come into effect after the 2025 municipal election. Throughout 2024, administration completed council-related reviews on matters including council-appointed committee framework, code of conduct, and the council compensation. Council participation on external organizations was touched on during these previous discussions. However, a formal review was not undertaken. Administration is recommending a review of council appointment procedures related to external agencies, boards, and committees to be completed in 2025 to conclude a fulsome review of council-related responsibilities prior to the end of the council term. This concludes the presentation related to the council compensation review and proposed policy changes. Administration is available to respond to questions of council.
Great. Thank you for the presentation, administration, and thank you to the consultant that was contracted to review this with administration. Members of council, questions for clear understanding? Councillor Hansard, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, is it just questions for clarity and understanding?
That is correct.
Or are there comments that will come later?
This is questions for clear understanding of the presentation.
All right. I am just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if perhaps we could get some sorry, I talked away from the mic. If we could get some clarification. In one place, we were shown a rather long list of, I believe, 17 comparator communities, and then, which I also appreciated, the administration then took it down to the capital region and then to the tri-region. And because we sit on different boards and committees with our tri-region neighbors. One of the things that I was wondering is when we're looking at council pay, we've made some strides in the last 10, 15 years in getting council pay up to a more reasonable amount of pay for the number of hours that the councilors put in. And that's not just sitting in meetings, but it's also preparing for the meetings, reading, et cetera. When we are talking about one of the areas where the councilors, it was estimated or given that 10 to, I think it was 12, now I'm forgetting my first number, 10 or 12 or 15 hours to 25 hours per week. Was that based on us, or was that based on the overall amount of time that councilors put in? Did that come from our survey?
Administration, go ahead.
Thank you for the question, through your worship, to Councillor Hansard. So within the third-party consultant's report, there's information that was provided with respect to the hours worked by councillors in a month. The original data provided for this survey was information that administration had been providing through other municipal surveys throughout the year, and it was really an estimation from administration's perspective. Within the lead sheet of the council report, we summarized the information that we received from the council surveys that we sent out earlier in the year in June. And based on an average of how council reported the hours they spent on the different activities in that report, the average of that combined was between 15 to 25 hours per week, sorry.
Okay, and Mr. Mayor, if I may, did that also include the time for preparing for the various meetings, attending various meetings and events and so forth is one thing, but preparing for them is quite a different matter.
Thank you for the question, through your worship, to Councillor Hansard. Yes, that was one of the questions that was asked in that survey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for clear understanding? Okay, Councillor Pacheco.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through to administration, and I'm going to refer to page 229. I'm a little bit confused with what is on this page a little bit. We talk about 8 full-time mayors at 47.1% and part-time at 9 for 52.9%. But when we get down a little further, it says mayors is a part-time 52.9%, work with a slight lead at 10 to 20 hours per week. A slight lead of what comparative to what?
Thank you for the question, through your worship, to Councillor Palechko. So this is with respect to the third-party consultants report, and I would be making a bit of an estimation here. But reading this, I would suggest that the slight lead at 10 to 20 hours would be that in that comparator of the part-time mayors, that there would be more represented under the 10 to 20 hours with that representation number of 5.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Any more questions for clarity and understanding? Actually, I'll just add on before I go to Councillor Anderson, Deputy Mayor. And then the same page there, I just noticed that the comparative municipalities, all the councillors are part-time, but we had 4 respondents saying that they work 40 hours or more.
Your Worship, thank you. And, having observed these over a number of years, often, the question of whether a council member is full-time or part-time, the definition, may fit, are they purposefully noted? So in the local government sector, City of Edmonton councillors would be designated as full-time. Does that mean that they actually work more hours than a council member in, some like a small community in Alberta? I don't know the answer to that as a fact, but it doesn't come into play in the way the numbers are presented. I can restate that in that, often there'll be a designation. A mayor will be designated full-time. But it doesn't necessarily reflect how many hours they do or do not work. They're just designated as such prior to.
Okay, thank you. And I think a lot of municipalities are going to primary work and secondary work. So as a primary work focus, then that means if anything comes up, you drop everything for your primary work, and if the primary work is the mayor of the community, then you take all those meetings, all those requests first before you do anything else. And if you're secondary, that's your secondary job, like most councillors are, then it's a give and take. And sometimes councillors do not make or attend events because that's not their primary job, primary calling. So it kind of just separates it from full-time to part-time, because as elected officials, we know, even though if we are full-time, we're not in the office 8:30 till 4:30 or 9 to 5 or anything, because our hours vary differently based on the events that we have and different days and weeks that we have. So it is in terms of how much commitment there is to it, but not the exact hours, because nobody's going to sit here for the same number of hours each and every day because they're full-time, because there's other events that happen. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking at the cover, actually, of this report, page 223, prepared for the town of Stony Plain by P. Walters Consulting, LTD. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, Mr. Mayor, so please interject if my question is out of line. But just looking to administration for some comments on the selection of this particular consulting company and sort of what their credentials were that led to their selection to do our compensation review this year.
Thank you, Your Worship, and certainly I can speak to that to a degree. So the company in question, I'll just say P. Walters Consulting Ltd. Frankly, Your Worship, quick summary: works in the region, reputable HR consultant, has worked for the town of Stony Plain on our staff and our staffing surveys, so a level of familiarity there, and certainly, without question, fits the bill of a qualified, capable, competent in this particular specific area of salary structures and salary market adjustments and reviews.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question through you to administration, and actually two questions. First is in regards to the technology allowance, understanding the pilot project. One of the things that I don't see in the pilot project, or at least that was listed, would be the provision of printer, of a smaller device like a tablet that could be more used for committee meetings. And I heard the term, the potential provision of the equipment rather than an allowance. So if it was a rather than, would that then mean that prospective councillors would be responsible for any equipment not provided, such as a tablet, such as a printer, ink, toner, all of those type of things?
Thank you for the question, through your worship, to Councillor Laurie. So we have contemplated printers within this recommendation. At this time, we were not intending to put the printers with the pilot project, but we could take that away to discuss. Tablets were not considered as part of the pilot project or part of this provision.
Thank you, and that's something that I would strongly suggest would be a consideration. I know going to many committee meetings and looking around, I think there's a majority of council, or at least a good portion of council currently, that utilize tablets over printing material or bringing a computer to every meeting, being how mobile we are with relation to a lot of our board and committee meetings. So that would be something I'd consider as to whether potentially whether that's included or whether there's maybe a smaller portion of the technology allowance that remains so that any additional pieces of technology could still be purchased. The second question I had to that is, being that this is a pilot project, the technology allowance may remain in the compensation policy. I'm wondering the amount at $2,750 or approximately $687.50 a year, even though it's only paid once per term, does not show any level of increase, even though over the last 4 years we've certainly have seen a significant amount of inflationary increase and costs. And also in technology, we've seen much more in the way of security challenges and breaches, which requires more expensive software to be utilized. Should the pilot project not necessarily be successful and a technology allowance remain, was there a consideration to raise the technology allowance to reflect the inflation in the market and to reflect the additional requirement for security softwares that we need to protect the municipality? Go ahead.
Thank you for the question, through your worship, to Councillor Laurie. So when we did the review of corporate technology provision and looking at it from a corporate standard provision, we determined that the costs were equivalent to what we could provide because we do bulk buy for the town. So at this time, we have not considered increasing that allowance at this time.
Okay. Thank you. And again, this will be a follow-on on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is, so I'm just figuring out how to phrase this here. This is more, again, in relation to ongoing expenses. It was explained at the beginning that ongoing expenses, for example, because we've purchased our own printer, that ink, toner, paper, all of that kind of stuff were expenses that we were not to be claiming, that those were included in the initial technology allowance. So if now that technology allowance is going away, in consideration, the office typically would have a separate budget line item for things like the printer, the ink, and that, whereas council doesn't necessarily have that same access, or we do have the access, but because we're more home office based, we're not here with the convenience side of it. Would that then be something that we would be able to claim under an expense account, under our expense account for things like staple supplies?
Your worship, it's through to Councillor Laurie. I think this is also, I would just say, good question, fair question. I think this is why we were hoping to and intending to go through a pilot project with it. Again, generally speaking, we are pretty adept at what we do around here. Not quite as understanding exactly what you guys do or don't do and how you go about doing that. And I think that's the intent of the pilot project. So, should council see fit, amongst other things, to move that along, those are the questions we would love to engage with or have answered prior to making a final recommendation on that side.
Perfect, thank you. And then I do have one more question of clarity, Your Worship.
Okay, let's go to Deputy Mayor for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to pick up on Councillor Laurie's line of questioning around the technology, certainly had a question as well specific to the conversation of a laptop. And we certainly know that we have sort of dual purpose devices now that are laptops that fold into tablets that, you know, can kind of serve in both capacities. Does administration have an idea what that device would look like, or if there would be some flexibility in what that device is for council? I certainly agree. You know, carrying around a laptop can be challenging, but having something that you know, Microsoft Surface makes a good two-in-one sort of thing. It's a laptop, but can also be utilized as a tablet sort of device. And so just looking for some clarity on what administration expects that pilot project to look like.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question, through your worship, to Deputy Mayor Anderson. Originally we contemplated a standard laptop for the pilot project. However, we could take that back to Technology Services and see if there's some flexibility in that provision prior to the kickoff.
Perfect, thank you for that. And hearing that one of my colleagues had similar concerns to what I had, I do think there's some validity to that conversation where there are devices that can serve as sort of a docking station tablet, but also as a device that can be quite flexible in its use as a tablet or otherwise. So I appreciate you taking that feedback. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is going to be really hard for me not to offer opinion at this point of this whole compensation package. Although I had various questions as I worked my way through it, when I got to this part, I thought somebody was transporting me back about 10 years into council life with 2 laptops, 2 iPads, 2 telephones, which became a tremendous burden when we were traveling to conventions and things like that. So I'm wondering if it was in the process, administration's idea, that we might be given an opportunity to meet with you or be interviewed on what we thought about this before administration decided to launch a pilot program. Because I know from my perspective, I feel like if the town is going to get into a pilot project, there's a certain amount of investment of time and money that has gone into that. You almost become obligated to go along with that rather than really be able to have some kind of say up front, such as the issue brought up by Councillor Anderson and also with Councillor Laurie. It's a royal pain in the neck to have to carry 2 of things with you when you travel, because I don't check my computers. I carry them in an overhead, and it's heavy to pick up and put that in an overhead container. The other thing is just sitting and working on computers. I have another life, as most of the people here. So at least with one computer, I can go back and forth between my different lives, my real estate, my personal, whatever. But if we go into this project, we will only be able to do town business. Is that true? On a town computer? I certainly wouldn't want my personal emails all in the town system to be scrutinized by town people. And it just seems that we're putting ourselves in a very awkward position, and then the physical burden of switching computers all day long when we're going back and forth between things, because I would think if it's a town computer, I would not be allowed to conduct my real estate business on it, or carry on whatever I'm doing on social media or with my family in my emails. And yet here we would be parking that computer, going to another computer, going back, picking up the other computer. I can't even begin to picture what that nightmare is. So would it be possible to have a talk with the administration before something is purchased for even a pilot program, and to find out what our concerns and angst feelings might be about that idea? Because I've lived that, and it really didn't work very well, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Harrison, and I lived through that too as well in the early goings. But however, this is the security of the town of Stony Plain. What you just mentioned is the reason why we're doing this pilot project. Is once councillors add their personal information, emails, and work to a computer that's logged in and attached to the town office, if they hack you, they can hack the town of Stony Plain. So for security reasons, with the growing demand for AI and people using AI to hack and all those phishing emails that go through, we can only, as a town organization, we can only protect so much. So once you add your personal stuff there, we can't protect your personal stuff, and that's how they're going to get into the system. So to protect the overall integrity of the town of Stony Plain, it may be uncomfortable, it may be bulky, but we'll find a way, because we need to protect this entity, not ourselves. If you want to do everything on your own stuff here, no problem. They can hack this. But if they hack this, this goes into our entire system, which means then we have to back up, find out where they hacked in, how much ransom they want. That's what we're trying to protect. As cybersecurity is a rising issue, and we have municipalities and corporations paying millions of dollars to get a partial of the information back, and sometimes they don't even get any of the information back because they just take the money and run.
Right.
So we're here to secure the safety of our town.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, because you said to protect this, I would never do anything of a personal nature. I don't even look on social media from this computer. I'm talking about laptops at home.
Yeah, but laptops, so for the laptop is as a municipality and organization, we don't want you to add your business and your personal emails to that laptop so that it's secure.
Your Worship,
is that okay? I think I understand where you're coming from, because but that's the bulkiness of it, and that's the cumbersome of it, but that's for the security of our community.
I understand what you're saying. Would it be possible for us to at least have a conversation before computers are purchased?
Yep. Sure, I think administration is already committed to have that chat. I think what Councillor Anderson and Councillor Laurie had mentioned earlier. Councillor Laurie?
Your Worship, if I may just
ahead,
make a comment all along the lines on this side. Is the intent of the pilot project that it would be voluntary in nature by members of council who would be wishing to act as pilots on these particular things. It won't be a mandatory, so to speak, pilot project of all 7 elected officials.
That's right. So if a councillor is not comfortable with carrying 2 phones and stuff, they don't have to. It's just a pilot project to see how that works. And again, I think members of council, we've noticed it, that we've actually increased our lots of phishing emails to our own emails, and councillors and staff are pushing the buttons, and that is causing what is a concern, and it's a big concern for our organization about losing our data and then having to pay ransom for it. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question to administration of a new statement that appears in the policy under the expense budget. It is page 6 of the new policy, which is, sorry, let me just find it because I was looking at the printed copy we had handed. It is page 247 of the council package. Under the expense budget, where it shows the mayor $20,000 per year, the councillor at $15,400 per year, it has an asterisk and it states, during a year in which a municipal election is held, council members shall have access to a prorated annual budget. The first question I have of administration is, would I be correct to understand that proration would be essentially less 16.67%, which would be equivalent to 2 months? So the month of November, the month of December, given that a municipal election typically occurs in late October?
Good question. Go
ahead. Through your worship to Councillor Laurie, that is correct.
Thank you very much. And prior to putting this clause in this document, was there any review done of the month-over-month expenses for council to determine what percentage of expenses actually occurred in each calendar month?
Thank you for the question. Through your worship to Councillor Laurie, there was not a month-over-month assessment done.
Thank you, and I will bring it up once the motion comes forward, but I do have a concern with this statement, because when we look at, like for instance, today we discussed the 2025 conferences that council would typically attend, and when you look at that, there's very, very minimal events or conferences, I would say, that occur in that November, December timeframe, and particularly new councillors are going to be inundated with things like orientation and that's more local, and so I would, without doing the data, I would hazard a guess that a vast majority of council expenses are actually likely spent in the earlier months in the year, lower maybe in the July, August timeframe, and even lower in that November, December timeframe. So I'm a little concerned with that statement, but again, I don't have a follow-up question on that, so we'll see if anybody else does, and we'll talk more about it when we get into the debate.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions for clarity and understanding? On page 241. Okay. Definitely like the summary of salaries and data that was used, and I appreciate the fact that we used a larger snapshot and then we shrunk it down to more of the capital region, as mentioned that some of the events and the requirements of members of council in the Edmonton Metro region are probably a little bit more than the ones that are not in the capital region. I'm just wondering why St. Albert was left off.
Thank you for the question through your worship to all of council. When we did a review, the city of St. Albert was a larger, I guess, municipality and wasn't included in our 17 comparators. And so we chose to go with the comparator Greater Edmonton Region municipalities that were in our third-party consultant report. And I guess just, sorry, to follow up with that is because we felt the third-party consultant report did a very comprehensive analysis. And so the data we pulled from that could be further substantiated between that report and then the review that we did with those internal 7.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any more questions for clear understanding from members of council? Okay, see none, Councillor Plechko for the motion, please. It's a sheet there.
Yes, I can see the sheet. I was waiting for her to put it up.
Oh,
but thank you. Thank you. That Town Council, A, approve council compensation and expenses policy C-CO-065, and B, repeal council compensation and expenses policy C-CO-064.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Plechko. So members of council, motion's on the floor. I'll take questions for comments, debate, and questions. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have one additional question. This is page 243, looking under honorariums. About halfway through the paragraph there, council honorariums will be adjusted January 1st of each year to reflect the consumer price index change year over year in the month of June. Just some quick clarity, and I think the year over year explains this, but just wanted to sort of make sure I have clarity. We're not looking at what the CPI or the consumer price index is in June. It's what the average of it is in June for the previous 12 months. Would that be correct?
Go ahead, CPI.
Thank you, through your worship, to Deputy Mayor Anderson. So as the policy is written, it is the CPI June the previous year versus the CPI June in the current year. And that is the difference in that is what is implemented into the compensation change for council.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate that. And just a quick follow-up, if I may, Mr. Mayor. What happens if that may be unlikely, but if inflation, comes back down and we see a negative change year over year, would that reduce council compensation for the following year?
Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship, to Deputy Mayor Anderson. That may exist, that would be presented in the corporate plan. We wouldn't recommend a reduction in that. It may come forth as a recommendation to hold due to what the CPI was.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question through you to administration. Under section 4.2, page 243, this isn't a noted item, but it's a question that I do have. If, because the members of council are eligible for a benefits package, the consideration of either alternative employment or not taking alternative employment may resolve in around not having a benefit package elsewhere. So if a current sitting councillor was to run for re-election and not be successful, would the current sitting councillor be eligible to continue with the town benefits package for a certain period of time while being 100% responsible for those expenses without requiring that to be written in policy? Or would that be something that would have to be in policy? So again, just for clarity, for example, a current councillor covered under the benefits package does seek re-election, is unsuccessful, and requests to pay 100% of the premiums to remain on this package for, let's say, a maximum of 3 months while they seek other employment or while they seek additional benefits to ensure that there was no lapse in benefit coverage. Is that something that would be able to be done independent of this policy, or would that be something that would have to be written into the policy?
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie, yes, there would be an option for us to look at what could be provided in transition time if a councillor were to not be re-elected and still looking to have benefits provided while they were looking.
Okay, excellent. So just for clarity, it does not have to be written into this policy in order for that to be considered?
Correct.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for clear understanding and debate? Councillor Hansard?
Mr. Mayor, further to Councillor Laurie's question, the answer to that, if I'm understanding correctly, was we would look into possibly being able to provide something while the councillor is looking for other insurance. But if you found something right away, or you found something even prior to the election and had it set up and ready to go, at the moment that you are not covered by the town policy, I believe that happens instantly right now. You're not elected, you're not covered after the next council is sworn in. It's not the looking that is the important issue. It's the time period that someone going on a new policy has to wait. You don't get to go right on another plan, I don't think. You have to take insurance and then serve out their 90-day waiting period, I think, unless something is prearranged. So if I'm not mistaken about that, could you speak to that, please?
Yes, I think that question is a good question. I think what I thought when I read through this, and I think Councillor Laurie asked the question and staff said that it is possible that if a councillor just chooses not to or is defeated, that they can have that conversation with the town to stay on the benefit package, provided they pay the full premiums themselves. And then that time limit may be a conversation of how long you served on council. I know some other municipalities have a defined timeline for, 1 month for every year you served, et cetera, or all that stuff. So that's.
So in other words, administration would work with the councillor.
That's correct. I heard that from, so, yeah. Any more questions? Deputy Mayor, go ahead. We'll go back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to follow up on the consumer price index question that I asked a few minutes ago. Just looking for some clarity if other measures were considered beyond the CPI. For example, we have one of the communities in the Greater Edmonton area uses the Alberta average weekly earnings values for the 12 previous months to calculate any increased compensation for council, and just wondering if we've had any discussion or dialogue around using a different measure when compared to CPI. That question comes from just even the price of goods over the last few years. We've seen very, very high inflation, but wages haven't necessarily matched that. We saw that even in the report that we have before us, where by policy, our increase was a little bit higher than some comparators because we were using the CPI there. So just wondering if we've considered other measures.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Administration.
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor Anderson, no, we did not.
Okay, and I think there's benefits to looking at both or either, and I think as both indexes, I've mentioned, I think you mentioned the Alberta average, which then just has the kind of the province that may be higher or lower based on the other conditions in the province and versus the country. I'm not too sure if one is better or not, members of council. You can give that some thought, but I think having it based on the consumer price index, that's usually a basket of goods that goes through, and then we all have to buy those same basket of goods. Okay. Councilor Fletcher, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Let's go back to the connectivity allowance. In this current compensation policy that we're looking to approve today, when you talk about the technology that we may try, of the $27.50 per council member, does that take care of the full $27.50?
Thank you for the question, through your worship, to Councillor Palechko. So the connectivity allowance for $1,500 is cell phones. Administration is not proposing providing that as part of the corporate technology. The $27.50 for the technology allowance covers the technology requirements for laptops and accessories.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Looking at it, I'm going to follow on the question that I had asked during the information. I'm really not comfortable with the 16.67% reduction in the expense budget in the election year, knowing that what we know based on my experience on council, that a vast majority of council expenses incur long before November and December of a calendar year. I'm wondering if, because this is being presented the way it's being presented, do I need to make an actual motion to have that removed? Is that something that we can look at as a general? Do we have to refer it back to administration to make amendments and come back to us? What's our process on that this evening?
Okay. Thank you for bringing that forward again, Councillor Lorry. Again, members of council, if do you see an issue with it? Do you want it changed or not? I think the conversation again is having that little extra comment there saying that it's prorated. So if we know that the election is, I think, October 20th this year, I believe, in 2025.
Yeah.
So then you take your $15,000 for the year, divide that up, and that's where you get to stop. And then, well, I guess it's until they get sworn in, so it'll be a week after that or 2 weeks after that. Is there an issue? Actually, have we had an issue with this?
Through your worship, thank you to you and all of council. We have not had an issue. The reason administration put that in the policy for this specific area was just recognizing that the Alberta Munis Conference occurs after the election. And so just from a budget standpoint, we were ensuring that the town budgeted appropriately for those requirements.
Okay, thank you. I think usually prior to that, because if there is a conference like about municipalities, all council is registered anyways. They'll come out of their budget, but it won't be kind of earmarked or paid for out of that council budget until after. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and exactly that. Again, even though the conference occurs afterwards, I would say typically, registration would be done, and we would only incur a potential of 7 registration fees. It wouldn't be a case of we'd have 7 registration fees for the sitting council, then the election would happen, and there would be 3 more if there were 3 positions overturned. And so I don't know that I necessarily see that being a concern per se. In the grand scheme of things, when you look, it would be, if we so happen to have a complete replacement of all 7 members of council, and if all 7 members of council to the date of the proration had fully expended their budgets, and the new members of council had come in and taken on that prorated portion and again spent that to the maximum, it would be a $19,000, just shy of $20,000 difference total. And I think the realistic possibility of that happening is very, very untrue. When I look at the differences in the expenses, for example, the mayor's expenses would be reduced by proration by just over $4,000, $4,167.50, and a councillor's proration would be $2,567.18. Again, from experience, our AM conference certainly does not cost that much. And then I think that kind of takes away some potential opportunity for attending other conferences and so on earlier on in the year. If it's the will of council that statement remain in there and we manage our budgets accordingly, or sorry, the future council manages budgets accordingly because this won't apply until the next council, I'm comfortable leaving it. I just think that it's potentially unnecessary and it may handcuff council of the day when it comes to that next election year.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, any other thoughts on this? Councilor Kletchko?
I kind of sit in the same side where Councilor Laurie does. I think that the reduction of that budget hinders what that council may be able to do for conferences. We just looked at what is coming up for the following year. There's very little in November and December that would warrant a or roughly a $2,000 reduction in a budget for that year. So I think if we need to make a motion, I think that's something that we should consider and debate it if we can't as council agree that that's something that should stay or go.
Administration, in terms of Alberta municipalities, what's the average cost for a councillor to attend in terms of registration fees?
Your worship, if I'll just take a bit of a ballpark here, it's usually about a $700, $600 fee, I believe, to register. Add on some hotel rooms and travel. It could be anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000, I would estimate. Your worship, and maybe if I may, a little bit back to, what we do find sometimes on the administrative aspect. Election years will always bring up a few different questions as to what happens before, what happens after, so on and so forth. And I think the asterisk included on the policy was an intent to acknowledge that difference in any given election year. But your worship, I guess I would also indicate that in my own experience between incoming or remaining elected officials as well as staff of the day, it tends to be figured out and worked out in a manner that everybody seems to get their heads around. So it was our attempt to just maybe differentiate a little bit, but certainly council can see fit to do as is the wisdom of council on it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Any more questions and comments and debate on that? Have I heard anything from anybody else? Okay, I'm okay with removing it. I think administrative staff has mentioned that they haven't done a month-to-month kind of analysis of all the expenses that come through from members of council. Through my 18 years of experience and then Councillor Hassler's 20 years of experience, this has never been an issue because I think there is enough in the expense budget to cover that. And also, if there are 7 members of council, like for example, if all 7 of us have registered for Alberta municipalities and on October 20th comes around the election, all 7 of us have turf, well, as mentioned, those 7 registrations just get changed, a name changed on it. So we're not like doubling it up. So that's already been paid for, but it's still going to carry forward to the next person that sits in this chair and vice versa. So I don't think we need it. But I heard from 3 members of council right now. Members of council? Councillor Anderson, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just quickly weigh in. I don't see an issue having this in here. I think having a prorated budget, I think, considers the potential of only being in the role for 10 out of 12 months of that year. I think if conference expenses were the only expenses that council members have, I think I could be on board with the removal of that clause, but there are other things that fall under our council expense budget that go beyond conferences and that sort of thing, and so I'm comfortable as it is.
Okay. Thank you. Any other?
I'll move it then.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Lurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make a motion then that council remove the clause in which it states under the expense budget during a year in which a municipal election is held, council members shall have access to a prorated annual budget, and then I'll speak to it when possible.
Okay. So councilors are making an amendment to page 247 of the agenda, is removing the asterisks. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Lurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate the comments that have been made, and again, I expressed in relation to conferences, because conferences typically are some of the larger expenses that council faces. Some of the other larger expenses that council faces also would be things like education and those type of things, which kind of in lines with conferences. Many of our education sessions actually are concurrent with conferences. Yes, certainly there are other expenses in relation to things like banquet tickets, kilometers traveled for meetings and those type of things, but those are relatively minor in nature. Again, as was expressed by yourself, Mr. Mayor, is that in the amount of time that you've been elected, this hasn't seemed to be something that's been an issue, so I'm not necessarily sure what problem per se we're trying to fix with this. I don't believe that handcuffing the amount that proration, even though it's not specified in the policy, the amount that proration would be without seeing a month-over-month summary of, the past 5 years, for example, to show what the actual amount of spending month-over-month is, I'm not comfortable with leaving it in the policy. Because it hasn't been a problem in the past, I don't really think that we need to task administration with that work and send this back to them either. So I believe the motion to just remove this and have the policy go forward is appropriate this evening to make sure that this is done and direction is given, and potentially maybe it's something that gets looked at the next time this policy comes around, but actually gets looked at with the data rather than just a presumption that it's 2 months, we'll just take 2 months of proration.
Thank you. Members of council, there's an amendment on the floor. Questions, comments, and debate on the amendment. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I did speak to this prior to the motion coming forward, but just some additional thoughts. Certainly, I think it's important, to have things documented, not just for this council, but for future councils as well. And as one of my colleagues on council spoke to a couple of weeks ago, just because it hasn't been an issue for this particular council over the last number of years or this particular administration, we're not just making policy for us today, but looking forward as well. And certainly today's conference schedule doesn't raise this as a concern potentially, or recent history, but that doesn't mean that down the road something may or may not come up. The other piece that I would add is we're talking about a 16% reduction in 1 year of a 4-year term, and I don't think that is going to be detrimental to the service that we're able to provide to our community in light of some of the things that have already been shared, right? That we are able to defer registrations to others at times if a member of council was not to continue. And so based on 10 months of service, potentially in an election year, I think that warrants 10 months of expenses. And I don't believe there should be an added cost to the municipality if a sitting councillor uses their budget and a new councillor comes in, and now we're having to pay expenses for two councillors that potentially go over the amount that's allotted for the year. And so as previously stated, I'm comfortable leaving it as it is and won't be supporting the motion this evening.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any more questions, comments, and debate on the amendment? Councillor Loyens?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just with a clarification, so what we're talking about is then leaving that 16% for the potential new counselor that may come. That would be leaving them $2,500 for the 2 months. Am I understanding the math correctly?
I think the math there is the prorated, so an existing counselor would only get to spend
The $2,500.
70, what was that, 79%? 79% of,
Right, so the new counselor would only get the 16%.
per se, not really. So I've lived through a few elections, and what happens is
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand is
so if
my mathing isn't mathing.
So, for example, I've been in situations after election where I was elected and another councillor was not, while the new councillor comes in, just takes over the role, and sometimes there's more than that prorated amount there because they haven't intended anything. So again, looking through the policy, it says that, you know, we do have the ability to work on amongst the team here. So to say that individual council that gets elected on October or whatever, and gets sworn in at the end of October or beginning of November, they're not limited to that. They're limited to the full amount that's there. That's whatever's left over.
Okay.
But I think the idea here with this one is to make sure that there is set aside money just in case a councillor used all their expenses up to that time.
Because playing devil's advocate, what happens if a currently sitting counselor spends their budget, leaves the job, quits, whatever, has to go away, and there's no budget and you have a by-election? Then what would be the case?
Right. So it's a similar thing, yeah. So if in year two of after the election, if a councillor uses all their expenses and then quits halfway through, then yeah. So yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So I see your comment.
Okay, no, I'm good. I will leave it at that for now.
Councillor Hansard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the mayor, we have a bit of a contingency fund. So let's say one councillor does not return to the next council and all their budget has been used. The mayor has been able to access funds that are sort of in a contingency. Would that not pay for the new councillor to go to the one conference now or in the future that usually happens? People are generally, in this time of year, not running off to conferences because there's a lot to happen around your municipality with holidays and so forth. And it's not a big conference going time of the year. Does the mayor not have the ability to take from the council contingency to support the new councillor in this particular election year coming up, should that happen? If everybody here returns to council, no problem. If nobody here returns to council, well, that could be a problem. But honestly, in all the years I've sat here, it seems like that has never happened, and here we are worrying about something that probably is not going to happen. Most likely, percentage-wise, is not going to happen. So it just seems rather odd to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Yes, so in terms of councillor expenses, there is the individual expenses, and then there's the overall group expenses. So what you're mentioning now is if, for example, the mayor, myself, if there's the six of us and we each have $15,000, and if one person's over, we can kind of shift it and kind of use it amongst ourselves as a team going forward, so it's more like a team budget. In my years of sitting in this chair, we have not had a councillor go over. There was only one time that we had to make him come to motion to have a councillor go exceed their council budget by a considerable amount, which we couldn't cover internally, and that was yourself, Councillor Hansard. Oh, that's hard to believe. Yes, it is true. It is true, and then I'm going to provide the reasoning for that, and it makes 100%. So again, as that transition came, it was not even an election year. It was a year that you had a little more things, but you did not claim your expenses in the right year, and you carried it over. So we had to claim it because we couldn't go backdate it because, as you mentioned, our auditors closed and we shut down the file. So it got added to the current year, which then put you over, and then it was over by amount that I was not comfortable of spreading up amongst other members of council. So we had a motion to say, okay, this is the reason why Councillor Hansard is so far over, and so that was done. So that's
I don't
what
know
happened.
if you want to say the amount, but Mr. Mayor, you love pointing out my mistakes in council chambers.
No, I don't. I'm just using real life experiences that I have so I can share that wisdom with members of council because, you know what, I may not be elected again. That way, there's the knowledge amongst this table and team. So it does happen, and it's only happened once, and that was the reason why, is because the councillor forgot to claim their expenses earlier. And hence, that's why we get emails from our staff all the time, submit your reports, submit this, because when they want to do audit and it's done, they want to close that file. Okay, anyway, so Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if this is a thing, but it just sort of sometimes feels like the simplest thought might be an easy solution. But is there any reason that we couldn't have the expense year for mayor and council run from the organizational meeting through 12 months as opposed to an actual calendar year, so that we don't have the situation where we're debating 2 months of expenses and prorated and different people? It's my understanding that a fiscal year could be a year chosen. I don't know exactly what ours is month to month, but you know, could we not have our expenses just go from November 1st to the following election, I guess, or November 1st, October 31st, if that's when the election is, as opposed to a calendar year?
Your Worship, I could speak to that through to Deputy Mayor. So, quick answer. I mean, our fiscal year is our fiscal year. It isn't alterable or changeable, so to speak. I mean, we can and we do certainly in election years track that. Incoming councillor starts on this day and utilize this much, and we break that out to a degree, or we can break it out to a degree, or a sitting councillor that. Is no longer part of the council after the election. We can make those differentiations, but our fiscal year is our fiscal year. The computer system, our financial systems are all set up to fiscal year to fiscal year. So January 1 to December 31st.
So the answer is no. We couldn't change the expense to 12 months. Sorry, just for my own clarity. Yes, fiscal year is fiscal year, but
the fiscal year is the fiscal year. We can pull those numbers out, but I guess the no part would be a fair amount of work to for what I would believe to be frankly little gain. We would generally have it, but
fair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Loyens, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm inclined to support the motion in front of us, just based upon the comments that I had made and the clarification from yourself, that technically a municipal election could be held at any time regardless. And so to prorate anything wouldn't really stand, knowing full well that we could be re-elected in October and somebody could have to leave the position by January and it starts all over again. So the fact that we are hoping and praying that it's only every 4 years doesn't make sense to me. And Councillor Hansard pointed out that you as mayor have special signing authority that may allow some budget dollars from other councillors to be moved around to help a new sitting councillor. So with that, I would be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And then just to be clear, I always make sure we talk to members of council involved before I start moving dollars around. It's just like, you still have some budget left. Is it okay if so-and-so uses your budget? It's not like you're going to give them your budget. It's, you get a puppy? You going to buy me a puppy? All right. Okay, any more questions, comments, debate on this? Councilor Lowry?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, no, and I appreciate the comments all around the table here. I think, like I said, it obviously was a point that spurred some discussion, some consideration, and some thoughts. One of the things that came to, and actually I didn't even think of it when I was initially going to it, was that thought of a by-election. What would we do in relation to budgets if there was a by-election? And my only thought on that would be, well, we would have to transition to protect against that. We would have to transition to monthly budgets. But then that goes back exactly to my point on this, is that January through December, we have different levels of expense at different months based on the certain business that's going on during that time. Just like any corporation, just like any business, we don't have a flat grid, I guess when you call it, if you were to look at our expenses as to when we actually spend money. And so that's where this comes in for me as a point of concern, is just knowing that by experience, November and December typically are not heavy expense months. But if we are cutting 1/6 of the budget for that year, that could have a negative impact on future councils. This is forward thinking. I am thinking about what impact this would have on the council of a day in that time period. Ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, as you mentioned, we have contingencies, we have flexibilities. The maximum negative impact based on the numbers that are here today, and this would be a 7 out of 7 turnover, and this would be 100% expenditure on both the full budget of the councillors that were leaving and the 16.67% of new councillors that were coming in. The maximum fiscal impact would be just shy of $20,000. It is a very, very small dollar amount to make sure that we are not hamstringing a council that sits into maybe not attending conferences, not attending meetings or anything like that, that would be beneficial to them and would be beneficial to the town and the business and the representation of residents. So while I can see some of the points against it, and I don't necessarily disagree with them, I think from an impact perspective, leaving this clause in leaves a higher potential for negative impact than taking the clause out.
Okay, thank you. Call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Okay, and that amendment's carried. Okay, members of council, we're going back to the original motion from Councilor Plechko, and that has that little asterisk and note taken off. Councilor Plechko?
Do you want to finish what you were saying, and then I'll...
I'm just saying that we'll come back to the original motion that was made by Councilor Plechko.
Okay.
And then it is now as amended with the asterisks and the note taken off.
Thank you. So, question for administration. I'm sitting here tonight, I keep thinking technology allowance, connectivity allowance, and one of the things that struck me a little bit ago and has been sitting here making me not feel good right now is security. And the reason for us going to a computer is security. Yet on our phones, we have all of the technology that we have here today, and our phones are 100% secure. How does it change? Help me to understand why this new technology that you guys want to provide to future councilors, how does that change? Are we not going to be able to do any portion of this on our phones anymore? And I'll think to my own self, quite often I have to carry 3 different pieces of equipment because I work, I have a personal life, and I have a council life. The way it is today, I'm allowed to have it on my phone. So I can travel just about any place I need to go, and I can get my town stuff, I can get my personal stuff, and I can get my business stuff. And each one of them has a very secured connection that I have to use multiple authenticators to get through. So I'm struggling with this technology allowance and you providing all of that technology to council for simply security reasons when we still have it based on our phones. Can somebody please answer that? How the phone is any different than a technology allowance where we'll go out and buy a computer where we can, for me, I would be able to put 3 of my different allocations on it and still have all 3 very secure.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Pletchko and the rest of council, I think, maybe if I can just speak on this topic a bit and provide some, roundabout perspective. I think what administration is trying to do is balance what we believe to be, security of our systems as a whole with and I'll just say that, the questions and the comments that Councillor Pletchko has just put on the table, so to speak. What we wanted to do, what we are looking to achieve is run that pilot program so that we can understand, again, what you guys use exactly, what you don't use, how does that work, so on and so forth. And I think the idea here is to run a pilot project, to understand what we can do perhaps better, or what we can work with, elected official in this particular setting on, how the systems interact, so on and so forth. Understand some of these questions, understand some of these concerns, and then ultimately, go from there with any kind of recommendations. What we're not looking to do is, again, have all 7 councillors on a new thing starting January 1st. What we do want to do is be mindful of the security challenges that we can have, and there's all kinds of different ways that people can get into our systems. Phones could be one, different ways to do it. We're never going to eliminate that risk, but we do have we do want to take some steps to see what else we can minimize or mitigate. Your Worship, and I guess I'll speak to all of council on this particular side of it. We want to work with you as to how we could maybe secure the system a bit better, but it has to work with you. Ultimately, you're the customer in this particular instance. It's something that it's incumbent upon us as I'll just say, quote unquote, service provider in this instance, that it works for the customers. And if it doesn't work for the customers, then we'll have to find different ways to do it.
Okay, I appreciate that. And again, this is a pilot project of those councils that want to try it. And as mentioned on this council compensation review, the technology allowance is still there, so it does not change anything that we currently do right now. And as mentioned by administration during the presentation, that this will be a pilot project, and then a recommendation will be coming forward, which then would adjust that council remuneration compensation package if council chooses to at that time. So it is a pilot that we're going to see how it works.
Well, I thank you for that great description. We were sold that it was based on security, and some more security, when really at the end of the day, I don't know that that's truly what it is. I thank you for your comments, Tom, and how that works to better the system. I think that's what I was looking for, because I don't believe for security that it can't be done with the system that we have in place today, based on all the technology and the jobs that I've had over the last little bit that tie multitudes of companies together on one piece of device. So I thank you for that answer, and I appreciate that. And when you talk about a pilot project too, I think the other thing that we have to consider here at this table is, when we're talking about pilot project, there's a cost associated with that. Councillor Hanser said it not too bad a little bit ago. You invest a ton of money and time into doing a pilot project, you're almost obligated to go down that route because you already spent the money. If it's something that we can lease to try and look at a way to cut that cost back, I think that's something that we should be looking at as well. So I think that conversation needs to be had a little bit further before we get down that road.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments on the, Councilor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question through you to administration regarding this. During this review, was there anything that doesn't exist in the current policy for the town that was considered or reviewed as something that might be beneficial to add? And one of the things that stands out is, because of the nature of the role of a councillor, not eligible for things like maternity, paternity leave. And so I know many municipal councils have included a parental leave as a portion of their council compensation and expenses policy. I'm just wondering if that was something that was considered when this was being reviewed, and if it wasn't considered, if there would be a way for us to potentially get a report back on that prior to this going into effect without preventing us from adopting the policy today.
Administration?
Thank you for the question, through your worship, to Councillor Laurie. So although we did a holistic review of municipal comparator policies, we did not specifically look at parental or maternity leave. Should council wish to direct administration to look into that, that could come back at a later date. It could also potentially come back as a standalone policy. So I don't think it hinders the work that we're doing today. We could always bring an amendment forward in the future.
And then also, and council also has the ability to approve a leave of absence for a sitting elected official as well, in terms of parental or sick leave, or if a parent is ill.
Yeah, Your Worship, I think we do have some policy structure related to some of this, but ultimately, in the event, so to speak, but I mean, like you just indicated, council can provide leave of absences with or without pay, frankly, which would allow that to continue. But we can certainly do a quick review and provide some update or comment on that in short order via email, just to see how we see that. Again, clearly, I mean, it wasn't specifically looked at. Just back to Councillor Laurie's question about, could that happen with or without making a change to the policy or the motion in front of council? We can commit to doing that without, sorry, Your Worship, I lost my train of thought there. We can commit to doing that without changes being made to the motion in front of you.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think this just goes back to kind of some of the stuff that we've heard throughout our municipal conferences about inclusion and accessibility in relation to council roles. And one of the things that has stood out is that kind of unknown about, how is something like a paternal leave considered when running for an elected position. It's something that, while I appreciate administration's willingness to, come back to us with an email and a report and things like that, I'd actually like to see it maybe a little bit more structured. I would like to see a report come back into chambers in regards to it, and something that we can actually consider an administration recommendation coming from that. I believe it would be worthwhile. I don't think it has to be, something that's incredibly expedited. Again, anytime essentially before the next council is elected would be sufficient. But I think for that clarity when we move forward to the next election, for those considering whether they would like to run, and trying to remove barriers for anybody who would be considering to run, for somebody to see that in there, I know, again, that's one of those things that's been talked about quite a bit, is having those policies written and in place. Well, I know we have the ability to grant it. Again, that it's ambiguous. It doesn't guarantee somebody that there is something in place that would provide them with that, or it doesn't tell them that, well, yeah, we'll allow you to take parental leave, but it would be at zero pay. It would be an unpaid leave until you decide to come back. So I think actually having a documented policy that would be either a standalone policy or would be included in the council compensation expenses is a worthwhile endeavor, and I think it's something that we should look at.
Okay, Administration, you going to send an email back?
Yeah, Your Worship, again, means stand a little bit corrected. Like we do, there's a bylaw on file right now. We're just scanning it as we're kind of sitting here. It does speak to parental leave, does outline, how we go about that, so on and so forth. Does have compensation. I can see some compensation stuff, in it. Theoretically, bylaw will trump the policy anyway. But that's what I meant. Is I knew we had some policy structure in there that we would have to take a look at. And
yes, I think we debated that. I think that was in the people's policies. Is that somewhere there, or where is that?
No, Your Worship, it's a bylaw.
It's a bylaw.
Itself, yeah.
Okay.
So, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you. Appreciate that. And again, it didn't click in because it's not noted anywhere in the CC&E policy. So I'm just wondering if maybe it would be appropriate to add a reference somewhere in the CC&E policy to that bylaw, because this is what somebody who's considering running for council is going to look for. This is what they're going to look at. And so if we have that already, which, again, thank you for bringing that up, because it's starting to come back, and in 7 years, a lot of stuff goes through that you don't always remember. But having that reference in this document, I think, is incredibly vital, and I don't think that that would require a motion or any level of change, because I would consider just administrative and clerical, unless I'm not understanding that.
Your worship, too, we can certainly, we'll take that under consideration. I think the other thing, just as, your worship, if I may, to build upon the consideration here, this is, that's good information to future candidates, so on and so forth, packages, and, as we move into an election cycle, that's part of the packages that go out, so.
Yeah, so I don't think it's 100% tied into the actual compensation review itself. It's a separate bylaw that allows members of council to do that. And I think during that debate, I think we talk about sick leave and bereavement leave as well. I think. But maybe that if administration can send that bylaw to council so we can be refreshed on that as well. Thank you. Councillor Hansard.
Thank you, Your Worship. All this discussion brings something up. I didn't pay much attention to it because it doesn't apply to me, and I gave a quick scan and thought of maybe one or two members of council that it still would apply to, and that is was there not a reference made in here somewhere about child care, or did I just have that word pop into my head because I was reading about parental leave? I know at one time council had debated putting something in so that perhaps we could attract younger members of the public to run for council because they might have younger children. And in the past, there were some younger people elected to council who were a bit overwhelmed at how much babysitting they had to pay because they weren't thinking about all the evening meetings and the cost of paying for childcare to attend all these extra meetings that are required and council activities, etc. I can remember one councilor in particular made a comment about babysitting his children, and I said, you don't babysit your children, you take care of your children. If you have to be absent, then you pay someone to babysit your children. But there was a whole discussion around, at that time, compensating people for some of the childcare expenses. I don't know many jobs that do that. Certainly parental leave when a child is born or ill or whatever, but for some reason it came up in here. So please clarify, is that mentioned in this document? And are we now talking about that, providing childcare dollars? And if we are, what is that above and beyond what any other counselor is getting because they don't have young children to provide for? Just questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hansard. So that wasn't part of the market summary report earlier on, and it's not part of the compensation review for members of council currently. Right. Any other questions, comments, and debates? Okay. Just, I'm trying to find it, but I lost my spot. There was a section in here where I believe that said this compensation expense policy comes in place on October for the next council, but the expense starts January 1st. So I think in the past, all their council remuneration honorarium policies have always started January 1st of the following year. So is there a reason why we're starting this in October versus January 1st of 2026?
Thank you for the question, through your worship, to all of council. So we, when administration took a review of the previous compensation policies, they all took effect at the election date. So we stayed consistent with that.
Okay. And my second question to that, then, if that's the case, and that is, then in terms of this, looking at COLA, the CPI, then if council gets a increase in honorarium on October of the election year, then in January, are they eligible for COLA?
Through your worship, to all of council, that is correct.
Okay, so they get a raise after 2 months?
So thank you for the question. Through your worship to council, that is correct. That would, I guess, ensure that council is staying aligned with the compensation increases that happen on an annual basis.
Okay. Members, council, any more questions, comments, and debate on the motion as amended? Okay, see none. Councilor Peshko, anything to close?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Okay, moving on to 9.5, and this is our corporate plan for 2025 to 2027. Again, members of council, we had corporate plan meetings on November. What am I missing? Oh, that's, they want to do this. Where is it? Oh, yeah. Okay, so we're going to look at the 9.4, the second part of a conversation review in terms of the appointment procedures that we've talked about as members of council. So Councillor Loynes, please.
Town Council direct administration to complete a review of council-appointed procedures related to external agencies, boards, and committees, and provide to council in Q2 of 2025.
Okay, so would this be 9.4A? For B? Because we just approved, we've passed 9.4, which was the
1A and B, and this should be 9.42.
Through your worship to members of council. So within the lead sheet, this item had two separate motions tied to it. The one to approve the policy and then the one to direct administration to complete the external boards and committees review.
Okay, so then that would be 9.4B. So we don't confuse ourselves? C? Because we have A, B, and then C?
So do we need to remake that motion?
No, I'm good. So Councillor Loynes has made the motion. So it would be, this item, just for our own minute-taking sakes, would be 9.4C. Okay. Questions, comments, and debate? I think we've had this conversation before. And this is just to develop a policy back for council. Okay. Councilor Lowry?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just looking for clarity, how this differs from the motion that we had during corporate plan.
Your Worship, I don't recall the specifics of the motion during corporate plan, so I'll just speak to what this motion itself is or the perspective we take to this. So what we're trying to address here, I believe there's a little bit in the lead sheet that spoke to the manner in which council members are appointed to various boards and committees and commissions. That's done at the organizational meeting every October. The intent here is that we will look into that process a bit and provide some perspective to council on how that comes to and ends up in the council chambers.
Okay, and yes, that was the conversation at one of our pre-meetings, and that was I don't believe it was a motion coming forward, unless somebody recalls it.
Your Worship, I'm just looking. I thought we did make the motion, sorry, and I was mistaken when I said corporate plan. I thought it was at the organizational meeting. I'm just looking at the minutes here quickly.
Okay, while you're looking through there, any other questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay.
Just quickly, Your Worship, I don't see anything in the minutes, so it must have been that we had a discussion around it, and this is probably where that motion is coming from.
Yes, it is. Okay, call the question, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. Okay, now we're moving to 9.5, my thing. Thank you, and this is for the corporate plan of 2025 to 27. As council recalls, we just adopted the minutes from the corporate plan meetings from November 4th and 5th. We've had the opportunity to be presented by members of our min staff of some of the initiatives that are going forward in the next calendar year. Council had the opportunity to make queries and made motions to change it to make it ours, and this is the end results of it. Administration, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Following the presentation of the recommended 2025 to 2027 corporate plan on November 4th and 5th, we have made final adjustments as directed by council during those meetings to the corporate plan and are bringing the plan back for final council review and approval this evening. We have a number of motions related to the financial requirements as well as the acceptance of, in principle, the items outlined for 2026 and 2027. These motions are consistent with how we annually approve the corporate plan in accordance with the Municipal Government Act. And so with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions from council this evening. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you, Administration. Members of Council, we had the opportunity to review it and refresh your memory from early November. Any questions for clarity and understanding on the corporate plan? Councillor Meyer, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council approved the 2025 to 2027 corporate plan, including one, total operating revenue of $53,604,532 and expenses of $49,459,825 and unfunded amortization in the amount of $10,664,359 for 2025. Two, capital budget of $22,374,748, including $6,500,000 in contributed tangible capital assets for 2025. Three, transfers to reserves of $6,105,732 and transfers from reserves of $6,836,070. And four, accept in principle the items identified within the plan for 2026 and 2027.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Members of the Council, questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay. Seeing none, well done, members of Council and Administration. Again, those 2 days were very in-depth. We had the opportunity to hear what is moving forward for our community as we continue to grow from a village to a small town and now to a mid-sized city with getting closer to 19,000, and our eye is on a population growth of 30,000 in the next 10 years. So definitely the stuff that we've approved in the 2025-27 corporate plan will help us achieve that. Members of Council, again, this is a 3-year plan, but we're only officially adopting year one, which is 2025, 2026 and 2027 are just placeholders. Their tax increases are inaccurate, and they're there because that we had the forecast of the projects that we've already approved as members of council, and then that is based on no increases, no grant dollars, no nothing that comes in. And so our staff are really good at not counting the chickens before the eggs hatch. They're not building into some of that growth in there until the future. So definitely those numbers will come down as members of council sees and realizes. Last year, when we approved the 2024 budget, the 2025 budget was 15%. Right? And we did not end at 15% because things have changed, priorities change. We make sure that it comes down to a number that we can still build a community. We may recognize that our community still needs to be able to do things. And as seen in the previous reports, that our taxes are fairly low compared to the comparators in the region, and our reserves are low compared to those. That's a conscious effort by members of council to build a community without overtaxing our community. So great work, ladies and gentlemen. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Moving on to number 10, which is council discussion. This is the time that we allow members of council to update each other or ask questions for clear understanding or bring things to administration that we've heard from our residents. We'll start with Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question through you to administration. First of all, a comment. I want to send a kudos to our town's Public Works Department in respect to the snow removal. We had, as you mentioned, a very, very large dump of snow for our first significant snowfall of the year, and we were on top of it like you wouldn't believe, which was fantastic to see. I was traversing our local highways, however, throughout that same time period, and while through the city of Spruce Grove and between Spruce Grove and Edmonton, the conditions were quite well. The highway conditions for Stony Plain were quite poor. And I'm just curious, I believe we have the new contractor in Ledcor that's taking care of the highways for the province. And I'm just wondering if we have an open line of communication with them in regards to what we can expect for removal. It just didn't seem like it was up to par with the rest of the highways in the area.
Administration.
Through your worship to Councillor Lowry, you're correct. There was a changeover in contractors this year from the previous contractor to Ledcor. Town staff have been talking with the general contractor since they've come on board, so to speak, in the area. There was communications between staff and Ledcor prior to the snowfall. This appears to have been a growing pain for them in this first swath. This was I guess I'll generally say to council, it was an open communication this early this morning with them about how to do this better with them. So I will confirm with council that we are communicating with them. I believe there's just this, like I said, it's just a growing pains for them as they do their first season.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that it sounds like we're already on top of it and that town staff will continue to work with them to ensure we have the best service possible for our residents. That's all I have this evening. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just looking to administration for some comments, if you wouldn't mind. I understand we have a program in place when the temperature drops below -20 for anybody in our community who may not have shelter at that given time. I think on our social media it refers to stay warm, stay safe. The link that I could find though is about 4 years old, and so just looking to administration for some comments on our current practice in opening up facilities for those who are unsheltered in our community when the temperature drops below -20 degrees. Thank you.
Administration.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Deputy Mayor and the rest of council. Yes, so we have spaces available in the community and the region. Our peace officers, bylaw officers, and our CMP officers help connect people. People are also able to use public spaces such as the library or Westview Health Center as needed. And I will review the website links, so thank you for letting me know about that.
Okay, thank you for that. Those public spaces, for example, the library, open during business hours. Do we have anything within the municipality out of regular business hours, evening and overnight hours, that can be accessed if necessary?
At this point, I believe there are warming stations, but I believe they're located in the city of Spruce Grove. I can confirm that and send an email to council.
Okay, yeah, and would greatly be appreciated. I know Spruce Grove is sort of their community response team, but they also currently aren't able to come into Stony Plain, and so would certainly hope that we do have something available or ways to transport those in need to find those spaces. I did believe that we had a couple local spots, whether that was St. Matt's or Westview Health Center or something that was overnight. And so some clarity there would be awesome. Yeah, when you know. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Hansard.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two things this evening. One, I wanted to let everyone know that Ron and Doreen Conan, who annually work with a whole group of volunteers to put on the Christmas dinner that they host for free to members of the community who have no one to have Christmas dinner with or no place to go, have actually put out a request for assistance. It's gotten bigger every year, and the cost is pretty exorbitant. So they're looking for people and also volunteers, but volunteers who know, they get lots of people who are wanting to help out, but it's lovely if they can get people who know their way around a kitchen. I'm looking across this desk and I see some, but not saying it has to be these good people. However, it's quite a thing to put off a dinner for about just under 200 people approximately every year. And they've been doing it out of their own pocket for the first couple or so years after taking over from former peace officer Buck and his wife. And now they're asking for assistance and some help in the preparation for that. So just letting people know that that is available. Doreen can be reached through Facebook. She's put out a plea on UpChat and some of the other sites that they would appreciate some assistance. And just letting everybody know. Second thing is a member of one of our residents in Westera approached me, and I am going to send this forward to Planning and Infrastructure, but she's concerned about the second arena being built in that area and wants to know what is being done to prevent the homes on the north side of the arena from having foundation and sump pump issues with the extra water draining their way because of the amount of cement and so forth that's going in. Actually, this person reached out to 2 other counselors, and I know one of them said, "You're in good hands with Councillor Hansard, so here's my proof that I didn't just drop this resident." But I will be glad to forward this information to Planning and Infrastructure. In the original contact, she sent pictures, and she's just very, very worried about what this will do to her house, and also wanted justification as to why they needed 2 ice skating surfaces less than 30 feet apart in that park. And I'm assuming that had something to do with, is there that big a demand? And maybe some explanation about that. So is it acceptable, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Newstad, if I just forward this and allow you to take that and be in touch with her?
That's great, Councilor Hansard. Yes, that's the best course of action, is always to forward it to administration, CCing our town manager and our EA and myself.
So did you also get it, Mr. Mayor?
Nope, I had a different.
Okay, I'll forward that. I don't mind forwarding to all of council and the mayor, our town manager and the general manager.
Yeah, and usually when staff reply based on a number, usually with something that may concern all members of council or the community, then it's CC'd back to all of council, so we'll all have the same answer.
And I'm sure we all would have some kind of an answer for her, but she deserves, and the other residents deserve, a knowledgeable, a learned response.
Okay. Thank you, and that's your 2, right? Councilor Pletchko.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Hansard, just so you know, our family has volunteered for that evening to cook. Last year we cooked as a family and served a multitude of residents within our community that are less fortunate. It was a great turnout, and they do a phenomenal job. Also wanted to mention that Mayor Choi and myself on Saturday morning had the opportunity to do some of the last smile cookies for the Kinsman campaign here in town, which was absolutely phenomenal. This year they did over 14,000 cookies is what has been reported so far. So from what we understand, it was up from last year again. So great support from all of the people within our region for the local charity that gives back to the community at Christmas time. Wanted to say a special thanks to the Public Works team for getting the roads done in a very timely manner. If I could just make one comment, maybe the CPOs could make a little more tours on 628, starting from about Veterans all the way to Range Road 12. It has become the noon hour drag strip for the local students, and they take Rosenthal, the corner, to see how fast in our estates, how fast they can go around the corner to Fishtail. It has become a very common thing up in that neck of the woods at lunchtime now. So if we could do that, so again, thanks to Public Works for making the roads good and putting the salt down, which kind of put a bit of a stop to the fishtailing around the corners, but just a heads up for the CPOs and the RCMP if they could maybe look at that. And that's it for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Leschko. Councilor Loyens?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question to administration about the new path we have with Spruce Grove as to whose responsibility it is to clean it. Apparently there was some confusion to some residents when they were inquiring, as it wasn't clear the day it snowed. Apparently, according to them, Spruce Grove's half got done, but ours didn't. And they were just curious as to when or who is actually responsible.
Okay, go ahead.
Through your worship, the Councillor Loyne. So the two trails that were built, the one on the north side is looked after for snow removal by Spruce. The most recent one is looked after by the town. This is the first year that we're looking after the trail. We do follow our established policies and procedures with all of our trails, including this one. This is one that I will say that we're trying to coordinate service levels with Spruce Grove right now as we learn. My counterpart in Spruce and I are certainly talking about how to make sure we're looking after things in alignment. So would attribute this that we got a lot of snowfall on the Saturday. There was some snow clearing that did occur on the Friday before, just some lighter stuff, and they were back out, getting out there with the rest of the trail system as well. So we do recognize that we're trying to learn how to be in alignment with each other as we go through these things. There is good dialogue between us and Spruce, and we'll continue to watch it and make adjustments to make that as best as we can.
That's good. And then the only other thing is a reminder that on Sunday, it is our winter light up from 6 to 8 on Main Street. And that is all.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Meyer?
Nothing for me this evening, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Meyer. And then, just got a couple questions raised from members of the community is, because now it's colder and everybody's wondering about the outdoor rinks. Do we have kind of projected opening dates for the outdoor rinks?
Through your worship to all of council, yes, so snow clearing took a lot of the team's attention over this last couple of days. Ice building does continue at all locations and services right now, and it's anticipated that they'll be open for public use late next week, pending the weather. The priority right now is Rotary Park, which I'll just gently say the teams are trying their best to have that open in lineup with the light up. As best they can, but it's all weather and resource dependent. And the Centennial Outdoor Rink may be ready as well due to earlier access for snow and arena operations. So the teams are working on it, working into the week here.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I had another concern in terms of the heat over at the Glen Hall Centennial Arena. We had a few people that attend the Flyers games and then a couple of the exhibitions for the Eagles, and they've noticed that it is quite cold in there. And is there something wrong with the heat?
Through your worship, thank you for the question. That's something I'd have to inquire about and probably send a response back.
Okay, please do. Thank you. Okay, that's it for me. That goes to council discussion. Moving on to number 11, which is closed session. We do not have any today. That moves to adjournment. So again, members of council, thank you for reading your agenda packages and being prepared to come and share your experiences and debate and comment and ask questions for clarity. Thank you, administration, for providing the package. We look forward to your great work in the coming months before we end the year. With that, we are adjourned.